Hey everyone, I'm curious. Where are you all tuning in from? It would be great to hear a bit about the different places our community is connecting from around the world. Share where you're watching from and maybe a fun fact about your local area. I'm always excited to learn more about the amazing people who support us. Can't wait to hear your stories. Best regards. My family and I went on a trip to the Hocking Hills area of southern Ohio a few weeks ago. There was a place that I always wanted to visit, the abandoned ghost town Moonville rail tunnel. I have never been to this area, so I didn't know what to expect, but I did know it was pretty deep in the woods. We took a trip from our rented cabin using Google for GPS to the location. We start driving and it's, for lack of better words, real impoverished where we are driving/hills have eyes-esque. We literally only see a few cars on the way there and are on back roads. We get to a point where we need to enter into a forest and we are close to the tunnel. There was a sign that said we were entering Bubblewood. For a little additional information, I drive a Mercedes that I am just lucky to have and have my husband in the car, a black man with dreadlocks, my 10-year-old nonverbal autistic son, and my 6-year-old daughter. We drive down this real creepy stone road into the forest, and there is nothing back there. No houses, no cars, nobody. We see signs that we are close and pull in the parking lot. There is a footbridge with a ton on it that people put there. We walk over the footbridge and make our way toward the tunnel, which is a lot larger than I expected. We hear this sound coming from the other side of the tunnel that goes into the woods away from the parking lot. A truck comes driving through the tunnel toward us while we are on foot. He gets out of his truck with a chainsaw, and it's a white guy in his 60s. He walks with my entire family everywhere we go and through the tunnel. I tried to make small talk with him and pull some info about if he worked for the Department of Natural Resources, etc. He really wasn't budging. We turn around to walk out of the tunnel, and he starts using a chainsaw behind us, and the sound is just echoing through this tunnel. At this point, we have no cell phone service, and literally no one knows my family is out there except us. I was already worried my car was sending the wrong idea to people like we have money or something. We don't. We rush to the car to get the kids in their booster seats, and this MF comes driving over the footbridge in his truck towards us in the parking lot. I honestly don't even know how his truck fit on it. He stops again and gets out of his truck and starts walking the other direction, much to our relief. About this time, I notice there are dusty handprints on my car. I asked my husband if they were his, and we compared his hand and my son's, and they were not a match. I don't know who could have touched the car because we were with the chainsaw man the entire time we were there. We get out of there as fast as possible. Just a few minutes later, I look in my rearview mirror and there is a bunch of dust kicked up behind us, and there he is. He had to have driven pretty fast on the stone road to catch up to us like that. There is nowhere to go in this woods. The road is basically one lane and we have no cell service or GPS. Every time I think we lose him, he is there again. I am waiting for my tires to get popped or something, or for this guy to ram me off the road into a ravine in the woods. Finally, we get out of this woods and I turn out and he's still following. We were following printed directions to get back, and I ended up making a wrong turn in the excitement. The guy in the truck was finally gone, and I turned around to go back past the stone road that goes into the forest. There is one lone house near this road, and there is his truck, parked there. He had to have seen us drive onto this road into the woods and taken some back way to the tunnel. I don't know if he was just trying to protect the site from more graffiti or what, but he really creeped us out. It was like every scary movie trope rolled into one single event. I like to look for new, out-of-the-way fishing holes. If I'm on a trip and have my gear, I'll pull up a map, look at the different connecting waterways, and try to find back roads that may lead to spots that few people know about. On one trip about 10 years ago, I'm in western PA, and I'm looking for a road to connect me with this small and out-of-the-way stream that I found on the map. I'm in the country, it's not too desolate, but houses are definitely getting farther and farther apart and looking more and more beat up. I surmise that I am really close to where this stream is supposed to be, so I turn down a dirt road that leads toward a tree line in the direction I believe this stream to be. The road starts out in okay shape, but as soon as I pass into the tree line, stuff gets weird. It's mid-afternoon, but the canopy of trees is so thick that it suddenly looks like dusk. Then the road very quickly deteriorates, starts to close in, and then starts to vanish. There are banks on either side of me, so I figure I'm on some sort of old logging road that rarely, if ever, gets vehicles on it anymore. The road is getting worse and worse. Large rocks start appearing at random spots in the road, first sporadically and then more frequently. It's very unnatural looking. It looks like they were placed on purpose. My car is 4WD, but I'm getting a little worried because the rocks are getting larger, and combine this with how tight the road now is, and driving around them is becoming sketchy. I'm now driving very slow to not pop a tire or make a wrong move and get stuck on the bank or something. The road suddenly takes a very sharp left-hand and downward turn. I creep along this turn but stop as I see the road continuing this weird downward trajectory. At this moment, my gut starts talking to me and telling me to turn around, but it's at this point I realize I can't. The road is not wide enough to do a 3-point turn. I could chance it, but I didn't want to get my front end caught on something pushing over the bank, or my back end going off the back in the other direction and getting stuck. I say to myself, keep pushing forward, and you are bound to get just enough room to turn around shortly. As I make my way driving this weird downward road with sharp curves and oddly placed rocks, I start to see items off to the sides of the road. At first it's just garbage, bottles, boxes, wrappers, etc. Then I start seeing toys, kids' toys, lots of them, an uncomfortable amount. Then I start seeing clothes. Some look old and weathered, like they've been there for years, and some look fairly new. The amount of clothes I'm seeing also increases. Then I start seeing mattresses. Not one random mattress, lots of mattresses, all over the place. There are dirty and dark stains on them. My gut is now screaming at me to GTFO, but I still don't have room to turn around. While I'm sitting there and trying to figure out my next move, I get that distinct feeling that I'm being watched. The moment that feeling hits me, I audibly yell at myself, "Nope!" Then I slam the car in reverse and drive reverse, dodging all of the random rocks and all the way back up and out the sharp turns until the path levels out again. I go full fuck this mode and risk making the 3-point turn. My back end goes slightly off the bank, and I slam back into drive and pound the gas to throw myself back onto the road and out of whatever dark woods bullshit I had discovered. I have no clue what I happened across that day. Best case scenario was probably some deep woods meth den. All I know is that ever since then, no matter what I'm doing, the moment my gut starts telling me to get out, I get out. This happened back in 2001 in the summer. I was a 17 male when I lived in Brooklyn, New York. Before I continue, I need to give you some background. I decided to live with my dad in an area of Brooklyn that I can never remember. My dad got a job as a prison guard. I asked him how was his first day. He said, fine, but this one guy gave me the creeps. I asked him, what guy? Then he began to tell me about this criminal named Jack, who would kill his victims with rusty farm tools and dump them in cornfields. I asked, what part about him creeped you out? He said Jack stitched a scarecrow mask onto his head, hat and all, which earned him the prison name Strawhead Jack. Well, this one time I was home alone with my German Shepherd Angel. I was watching Destination Truth after the episode ended. I went to see if Dad left me a leftover burrito for dinner in the fridge. When I was walking to it, I heard banging on the door. I wasn't expecting anything, so instinctually I said, "Who's there?" No answer. Instead, the person started banging on the door harder. I peeked through the peephole and saw somebody wearing a scarecrow hat. Then I thought, who could be wearing a scarecrow hat in the middle of summer? And then it dawned on me. I remembered it was the same guy that my dad told me about. Without hesitation, I made sure the door was locked. I grabbed Angel and ran out the back door. I called my dad and told him over the phone, "Dad, that guy you told me about is banging at the front door." He said, "Oh my God. Okay, head to your car in the garage. Hide in there, there's a gun in there for protection. I'm on my way." When he said that, I went to the garage in the backyard, shut the door, and hid in my car. Somehow that hellspawn got in the garage when I hid the car, and I got a look at his mask and hat. They were both blood-stained. The mask had a scar down the right eye, and I saw his eyes. They were gray with brown pupils. I saw his hands, too. The left one had scratches on it, and there was a large pitchfork. Before he spotted me, I turned on the car with my keys and drove out of there. I called my dad again, and he was just about to get in his car before I called. I told him that I'm going to the police station. He said he would be there. When he got there, I asked him how did he get out. It turned out he choked one of the guards with his chain cuffs. He was later found in a warehouse filled with cocaine and weed. Be careful when you live in the Brooklyn and always lock your door at night. I learned that the hard way. This happened to me in 1960, the year I decided to ditch the city smog and chase trout in the backcountry of Montana's Bitter Mountains. I'd always been a city boy, more at home with a newspaper and a stiff drink than a fishing rod and a can of worms. But a layoff and a messy divorce had me craving a change of scenery, the kind you only find where cell phone signals don't reach. Packed my beat-up Ford Bronco with enough gear to survive a zombie apocalypse, or so I thought. Had my fishing tackle, a worn copy of A River Runs Through It, a bottle of bourbon for good luck, and a dusty old rifle my father had given me. Just in case, he'd said with a wink, as if I were heading into the Wild West instead of a national forest. The first few days were peaceful, caught a few trout, read by the river, and even managed to shoot a can of beans off a stump just like in the movies. Felt like a real outdoorsman, minus the beard and flannel. Then on the fourth day the quiet was shattered. I was hiking up a steep trail, the kind that makes your lungs burn and your legs ache, when I stumbled upon a hidden clearing. In the center of the clearing was a ramshackle cabin, smoke curling from its chimney. It wasn't the sight of the cabin that stopped me dead in my tracks, though. It was the figure standing outside, hunched over a pile of something I couldn't quite make out. Curiosity got the better of me. I crept closer, keeping to the shadows of the trees. As I approached, the figure straightened up, revealing a man dressed in filthy overalls, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. He carried a wicked-looking bone saw, its blade stained a dark crimson. The pile at his feet, I now realized with horror, was a human body. The sight of it turned my stomach. The man didn't seem to notice me, too engrossed in his gruesome task. I wanted to run, scream, do anything but stand there paralyzed by fear, but my feet wouldn't move. Just as I thought I might faint, the man paused, his head cocking to the side like a dog hearing a distant whistle. He turned towards me, the shadows of the hat hiding his eyes, but I could feel his gaze burning into me. I bolted. I scrambled through the underbrush, thorns tearing at my clothes, the sound of the man's heavy footsteps echoing behind me. I didn't look back, just kept running until my lungs felt like they were going to explode. Finally, I stumbled into a thicket of brambles, the thorns tearing at my skin. I burrowed deep into the tangled branches, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear the man crashing through the woods, getting closer. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't find me. The footsteps stopped. Silence. I waited, not daring to move. Minutes passed, then hours. The sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees. I still didn't move. As darkness fell, I finally dared to crawl out of my hiding place. I was scratched, bleeding, and terrified. I made my way back to my Bronco, the whole time looking over my shoulder, expecting to see the man with the bone saw emerging from the trees. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my Bronco, the rifle across my lap, watching the darkness. The next morning I packed up my camp and drove to the nearest town. I went to the police station, told them what I had seen. They listened politely, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. I was a city slicker, a tourist probably just spooked by the woods. They promised to look into it, but I knew they wouldn't. I left Montana that day, a changed man. I never went back to the Bitterroot Mountains, never went camping alone again. The memory of that man, his bone saw, and the pile of human remains haunted my dreams for years. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something dark and sinister, something that the world wasn't meant to know. I never found out who the man was or why he was doing what he was doing. But I knew one thing for sure. There was evil in those mountains, and I had seen it firsthand. I couldn't prove it, couldn't even convince the police to take me seriously. But I knew what I had seen, and that knowledge, that terrible truth, was a burden I would carry with me for the rest of my days. Years later, I read a news article about a string of unsolved disappearances in the Bitter Rib Mountains. Hikers, campers, hunters, they vanished without a trace, their bodies never found. I couldn't help but wonder if there was a connection to what I had seen that day. I thought about contacting the authorities, telling them my story again. But what good would it do? They wouldn't believe me then, and they wouldn't believe me now. So I keep the secret to myself, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks in the shadows, even in the most beautiful places on earth. It's a weight on my soul, a constant companion that whispers in my ear whenever I venture too far from the city lights. But it's also a reminder that there are things in this world that we can't explain, things that defy logic and reason, and sometimes the best we can do is simply survive the encounter and carry the memory with us, a chilling testament to the horrors that lurk just beyond our understanding. I never spoke of this to anyone, the words caught in my throat like fishhooks. But some nights, when the city is quiet and the moon casts long shadows, I can still see the man in the overalls, his bones saw glinting in the firelight. And I wonder, did he choose this life, or was it chosen for him? Was he a monster born or made? These questions linger unanswered, just like the disappearances in the bitter roots. Perhaps some truths are better left buried, hidden in the darkness where they belong. I remember it like yesterday, June of last year. You know those long stretches of highway in Arizona? The ones where it feels like nothing changes for an eternity? Just stretches of red rock formations, the odd cactus, and that merciless desert sun. That's where I was with my RV heading for a remote campground off the beaten track. My name's Eamon. Pleasure to meet you, by the way. I dig the solitude. I always have. Nothing like the peace you find in the wilderness, especially if it's a spot most folks wouldn't even consider braving. I figured a few days of isolation would be good for the soul, you know. The drive itself was smooth until a little past sunset. That's when I started noticing the flicker something at the edge of the road. It was just quick flashes of movement in the scrubland, too fast to be a deer or anything like that. Honestly, I kind of get a kick out of the uncanny. Reminds me I'm not the top of the food chain out there, so a bit of a thrill ran through me even back then. Anyway, I reached the campground around 9-ish. It's pretty much as I expected. A dirt clearing, a few designated fire pits, and those awful drop toilets that always reek to high heaven. But hey, when you're out in the middle of nowhere, you take what you can get. I make camp, pop open a cold one, and soak in the stars. It's a clear night, and the Milky Way's a sight to behold when there's no city lights to wash it out. It's during my brew, minding my own business, that I hear it for the first time. A crunch, dry leaves snapping way too close for comfort. Now, I'm not the jumpy type, but being out in the middle of the sticks alone changes the equation. Suddenly, every little rustle sends your imagination racing. Heart starts to pound a little faster. You know the drill. So I stand up, grab my flashlight, and sweep the beam around the perimeter of the campsite. Nothing. Not a single glowing set of eyes staring back. Probably a squirrel, I figure, trying to calm myself down. I sit back down, but I can't shake the feeling I'm being watched. The silence, heavy and expectant, makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Another crunch, a little closer this time, followed by a kind of snuffling sound. "All right, whoever's out there," I shout, sounding way more confident than I feel. "Show yourself." Silence, then more crunching, circling me now. That's when the first guttural growl hits. It cuts through the night, deep, rough, and definitely not any animal I recognize. My blood runs cold. This isn't a squirrel or even a coyote. This is something else. Think fast, Eamon. I grab the hunting rifle I keep mounted inside the RV. It's the smart move, right? I mean, whatever the hell's out there, it sounds big, and I ain't about to take chances. The growls grow louder and more agitated. There's a rustling at the edge of the light cast by my campfire. Then another growl. Suddenly it darts into view. A hulking beast silhouetted against the firelight. Massive like a bear on steroids, but leaner, built for speed. Its eyes. God, those eyes were like burning coals, fixated on me. I raise the rifle, hands shaking like a damn leaf. The thing snarls, bearing a set of teeth that look like they could rip through a truck tire. Before I can even line up a shot, it lunges again, vanishing into the darkness. I can hear it close, circling, its growls mixed with heavy breathing. This thing, it's playing with me, hunting me, sizing me up. I fire a shot in its general direction, more to scare it than anything else. The sound echoes through the silent desert, and for a moment, there's nothing but my own pounding heartbeat. Then the growling resumes, punctuated by a crash from somewhere near my RV. Jesus, was it tearing through the van? I panic, fumbling for another shell. I need to get a better view, so I sprint towards the back of the RV, my mind racing. Flashlight? No, too narrow a beam. Headlamp? Bingo. That's strapped to my gear by the door. I grab it, flick it on, and swing the light into the inky blackness. And there it is, eyes blazing as it rips through my supplies. The creature tears open a bag of dehydrated meals, scattering the contents like confetti. What the hell is it looking for? It's then my brain catches up. Remember my first night on the road? That flicker back on the highway. Suddenly I connect the dots. The flickers were those eyes, this thing. It has been following me. The realization sends a fresh surge of adrenaline coursing through me. Not fear this time. Anger mixed with a healthy dose of desperation. I shoulder the rifle again, taking careful aim. This time I've got a clear shot. I squeeze the trigger and the boom shatters the desert silence. The creature gives a startled hiss and there's a thud. Got it. Maybe the snarling intensifies, filled with a new note of rage. I reload as fast as I can, hands slick with sweat. Now instead of the circling, I hear a purposeful charge. It's coming straight at me. I unleash another shot towards the sound, but then silence. I stand there, heart pounding, gun at the ready, straining my ears. Did I get it? Did it retreat? Maybe it's just waiting. I scan the darkness, the headlamp beam cutting through the night, searching frantically for any sign of those damn glowing eyes. There's nothing out there, just the whistling of wind through the dry scrub and my ragged breathing. Suddenly I sense movement above me. Swearing, I jerk the beam upwards just in time to see the beast leaping from my RV's roof. It lands with a heavy thump right in front of me, less than 10 feet away. In that moment, under the harsh glare of my headlamp, I finally really see it. It's like a wolf twisted into some unholy abomination. Its fur is black with mangy patches, its face too long, the jaw jutting at an impossible angle lined with jagged blood-stained teeth. Those eyes, they seem to glow brighter now, fueled by pure malice. We lock eyes, a predator and its cornered prey. I react on instinct, muscle memory taking over. I throw the rifle sideways, narrowly avoiding those lunging claws, and dive for the open door of the RV, slam it shut, fumbling desperately for the lock. The creature pounces against the RV with a force that rocks the entire vehicle, its snarls turning into frustrated roars. My mind races. I need a weapon, anything. Ready to defend myself, heart pounding in my throat. The creature's clawed hand smashes through the small side window, shards of glass flying. With a yell, I jab the poker through the opening, sinking it deep into the beast's forearm. It howls, a blood-curdling sound that cuts through the night, jerking free. It leaves a slick of dark crimson on the shattered window. For a tense moment, there's only the echoing howl and the pounding of rain against the RV's roof. I know it's temporary. It just bought me a few precious seconds. I run towards the rear of the RV, my mind scrambling for a way out. Maybe I can escape through the roof hatch, reach a tree, something. I throw myself against a cabinet, searching frantically. Bingo, flares. Grabbing a box, I tear one free, flick the ignition. Nothing. Another one, still dead. The beast is back. It snarls, rattling the RV. Panic tightens in my chest. I'd heard somewhere that flares can scare off wild animals, but right now, with those eyes glaring at me from the darkness, it feels like a pathetic last resort. One more flare left. I twist off the cap, strike the ignition wheel, and a burst of brilliant red light fills the RV. I fling open the rear window and hurl it outside. It hits the ground with a burst of sparks. For a split second, all I see is the red glow. Then my blood runs cold. There are two of them. Another hulking shape had been lurking in the shadows, unseen. Now illuminated, its eyes blaze like twin embers, staring straight at me. The trapped feeling is suffocating. There's no escape now. The injured creature lunges towards the back of the RV, slamming into it, causing it to shake violently. The second follows. I stagger back, the poker clutched white-knuckle tight. Easy, fellas, I mutter. Sounds damn stupid even to me. The metal begins to buckle under the repeated assault. The RV sways like it's about to tip. Glass shatters as a clawed hand reaches through the shattered rear window. With a primal yell, I swing the poker, catching it across the muzzle. It snarls in pain, pulling back. Suddenly an idea sparks. The gasoline. I stash the poker and scramble over to the jerry can I used to refuel the RV's generator. Hefting it, I douse the area around the creatures and inside the rear window. It's a gamble, and I pray I don't blow myself to kingdom come in the process. One of them lunges inside, its weight tipping the RV further. Grabbing the box of flares, I light one with trembling hands. I only get one shot at this. Come on, you ugly bastards. I growl and toss the flare. There's a whoosh as the gasoline ignites, instantly engulfing the back of the RV. The creatures howl in rage and surprise. I don't wait around to see if my plan worked. Shouldering my way out of the front door, I run, zigzagging, trying to be a difficult target in the gloom. Behind me, I hear an explosion as the gas tank goes up, and then a series of agonizing screams. I don't stop. I run until my lungs scream, until I hear the creature's howls fade into the distance. Then and only then do I slump to the ground, gasping for breath. The aftermath? Well, let's just say it took a lot of explaining and nobody believed me. Park rangers found my burnt-out RV, the remains of what looked like two large unidentifiable canines. They chalked it up to a freak accident, some predator on a bad trip. Me? I know better. I saw those eyes. Sometimes out there on the lonely highways, I still imagine I see a flicker of movement at the edge of the road. I check my rearview mirror, all the hair prickling on my neck. I tell myself I'm crazy, but those nights I double-check the locks on my new RV. Those nights I think of those blazing eyes and wonder if some things are better left hidden in the darkness. They probably called them hellhounds for a reason, right? My name is Manuel Gomez, and I am 35 years old. This happened to me back in 2005, and it's something that has stuck with me ever since. I'm a mechanic used to working with my hands and getting grease under my nails. I live in a small town called Millhaven, tucked away in the mountains of Colorado. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else, and secrets are hard to keep. But there's one secret the town keeps well, and it nearly cost me my life. I was working late at the shop one night, trying to get a customer's car ready for a long trip. The shop is on the edge of town, right by the forest. I liked working late. It was quiet, and I could hear the sounds of the woods. I'd been there so many times before, the creaks and rustles of the night didn't bother me. But that night was different. I remember glancing at the clock. It was almost midnight. I was finishing up when I heard something outside. At first I thought it was just the wind, but then I heard it again, footsteps. I walked to the door, opened it, and called out, "Hey, who's there?" Silence. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just some animal, and went back to work. About an hour later, I was packing up to leave when I heard the footsteps again, closer this time. I grabbed a wrench. It's not much, but it's better than nothing, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, and the moon cast long shadows across the parking lot. I scanned the area but didn't see anything unusual. Just as I was about to head back inside, I saw movement at the edge of the woods. A tall, dark figure stood there watching me. "Hey, you need something?" I shouted. No response. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Something wasn't right. I started walking towards the figure, keeping the wrench at my side. As I got closer, I could see it wasn't a man. It was something else, something bigger, with glowing eyes that pierced through the darkness. I stopped dead in my tracks. The thing took a step forward, and I could see it more clearly. It looked like a wolf, but walked upright like a man. Its fur was matted and dark, and its teeth gleamed in the moonlight. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't believe in monsters, but I couldn't deny what I was seeing. Before I could react, it lunged at me. I swung the wrench, but it knocked it out of my hand like it was nothing. I turned and ran, sprinting back towards the shop. I could hear it behind me, its breath hot on my neck. I burst through the door and slammed it shut, locking it behind me. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but the call wouldn't go through. No signal. I looked around the shop, trying to find something to defend myself with. My eyes landed on a shotgun mounted on the wall, an old relic from when the shop used to be a general store. I grabbed it, loaded it with the shells I found in a drawer, and took a deep breath. The creature was clawing at the door, trying to get in. I aimed the shotgun at the door and waited. The door burst open, and the creature charged at me. I fired, hitting it square in the chest. It howled in pain and staggered back, but it didn't go down. I fired again, and this time it fell to the floor, motionless. I stood there, breathing hard, my hands shaking. I didn't know if it was dead, but I wasn't taking any chances. I reloaded the shotgun, and I was able to and kept it trained on the creature until the police arrived. When the cops showed up, they couldn't believe what they saw. They took my statement and called an animal control, but no one knew what to make of it. They took the body away, and I was left standing there trying to make sense of what had happened. The next few days were a blur. The town was buzzing with rumors, but the official story was that it was just a wild animal attack. I knew better. I tried to go back to my normal life, but it was hard. I kept seeing those glowing eyes in my dreams, hearing the creatures howl in the night. I started carrying the shotgun with me everywhere, just in case. A week later, strange things started happening. People in town began to go missing. At first it was a couple of hikers, then a farmer who lived on the outskirts. The police were baffled, and the town was on edge. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected to the creature I'd killed. I decided to do some digging, see if I could find any clues. I spent hours at the library, poring over old newspapers and town records. I found a story from the early 1900s about a series of mysterious deaths in the area. The victims had been found mauled, with strange claw marks on their bodies. The locals had blamed it on a rogue wolf, but the descriptions matched what I had seen. I took my findings to the police, but they brushed me off. They said it was just a coincidence that I was letting my imagination run wild. Frustrated, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I reached out to an old friend, Maxine Dolan, who ran a survivalist training camp a few miles out of town. She was tough as nails and knew the woods better than anyone. Maxine agreed to help me, and we started patrolling the area where the creature had attacked me. We found tracks, large and deep, leading into the forest. We followed them for miles, deep into the woods, until we came across an old abandoned cabin. The place was falling apart, covered in moss and vines. It looked like no one had been there for years. We approached cautiously, guns at the ready. The door was ajar, and inside we found signs of a struggle, broken furniture, claw marks on the walls, and bloodstains on the floor. Maxine found a torn piece of clothing that matched the description of one of the missing hikers. We knew we were on the right track. As we searched the cabin, we heard a noise outside. We froze, listening. The sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoed through the trees. We moved to the windows and peered out. The creature was back, and it wasn't alone. Their eyes glowing in the darkness. We had to act fast. Maxine and I took positions by the windows and aimed our guns. The creatures started moving towards the cabin, their growls low and menacing. We fired, hitting one in the leg. It stumbled but kept coming. We fired again, this time hitting it in the head. It went down, and the other two stopped, looking at us with a mixture of rage and caution. We held our ground, firing shot after shot, until the creatures finally retreated into the woods. We didn't know if they were dead or just wounded, but we weren't sticking around to find out. We grabbed what we could from the cabin and hightailed it back to town. The police were more inclined to listen after that. They organized a search party and combed the woods, but they didn't find anything. No bodies, no tracks, nothing. The town went back to normal, or as normal as it could be after everything that had happened. I tried to move on with my life, but it wasn't easy. Every time I heard a noise at night, I jumped. Every time I walked through the woods, I looked over my shoulder. I knew the creatures were still out there, waiting. But I wasn't going to let fear control me. I had faced them once, and I knew I could do it again if I had to. Months passed, and the missing people were never found. The town slowly returned to its routine, the events of that summer becoming a whispered legend, a cautionary tale told to newcomers. I stayed vigilant, always ready, knowing that the peace was fragile and could shatter at any moment. Then one evening, as I was closing up the shop, Maxine walked in, a grim look on her face. "Jericho," she said, "we need to talk." She had found something during her patrols, more tracks leading to another abandoned site deeper in the woods. "I think we only got some of them," she said. "The others are still out there. We knew what we had to do this time. We were better prepared. We gathered a small group of trusted townsfolk armed to the teeth and headed back into the woods. The sense of dread was palpable, but we pushed forward, determined to end the threat once and for all. The new site was an old mining shack, hidden in a ravine. As we approached, the air grew colder, the forest eerily silent. We moved in. Inside, we found more signs of the creatures, bones, half-eaten carcasses, and the unmistakable stench of decay. But the creatures were nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, a scream pierced the silence. One of our group, Samara, had been grabbed from behind and dragged into the shadows. We rushed after her, but it was too late. Her lifeless body lay at the bottom of the ravine, her neck broken. The creatures emerged from the darkness, their eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. The fight was brutal. We fired our guns, swung our axes, did everything we could to fend them off. They were fast, strong, and relentless. We lost 2 more men, Roderick and Caleb, before we managed to drive the creatures back. By the end, the shack was in ruins, and we were battered and bloodied, but alive. We buried our dead in a quiet ceremony, the weight of our losses heavy on our hearts. The town's secret had come at a high price, but we had done what we had to do. The creatures were gone, and Millhaven was safe once more. Or so we thought. Every now and then, when the moon is full and the night is still, I can feel their presence, lurking at the edge of the woods. The town may have moved on, but I know better. The nightmare isn't over. It's just waiting, biding its time. But I've learned to live with it. I've learned to be ready, to keep my eyes open and my shotgun loaded. Because in Millhaven, you never know when the past will come back to haunt you. And when it does, I'll be there, standing my ground, ready to face the darkness once more. My name is Fernando Castillo, and I am 35 years old, and I am 26 years old. And this happened to me on June 14th, 1995. I was never a big fan of camping, but my buddy Tom had talked me into it. He said we needed a break from our 9-to-5 grind. We both worked at a small accounting firm in the city, and Tom was the kind of guy who thrived on outdoor adventures. Me? Not so much. But the idea of a weekend away in a rented RV seemed like a decent compromise. We decided to head to a remote spot in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Tom had heard about this place from some outdoorsy friends of his. It wasn't on any official campsite list, which meant fewer people and more peace and quiet. We both liked the sound of that. I had just finalized a messy divorce and was looking forward to some uninterrupted bro time. We drove out of the city on a Friday afternoon, the RV stocked with beer, fishing gear, and enough food to last a week. The drive was long, winding through endless forests and narrow dirt roads. By the time we got to our spot, it was already getting dark. We set up camp quickly, parked the RV, and lit a small fire. That first night, we talked about work, life, and everything in between. Tom kept the conversation light, cracking jokes and reminiscing about our college days. We drank more than we probably should have, and eventually stumbled into the RV to crash for the night. I remember thinking how nice it was to be away from the city's constant noise. The next morning, we woke up to the sound of birds chirping and the sun peeking through the trees. It was perfect. We decided to spend the day fishing at a nearby stream Tom had read about. It was a short hike from our campsite, and the path was easy enough to follow. We packed a lunch and headed out. The stream was beautiful, and the fish were biting. We spent hours there just talking and fishing. Around midday, we heard something strange, like a distant scream. It was faint, but it was there. Tom dismissed it as an animal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it sounded human. We both shrugged it off and kept fishing. On our way back to the campsite, we found an old weathered cabin. It looked abandoned, with broken windows and a door hanging off its hinges. Tom, being Tom, wanted to check it out. I was hesitant, but he convinced me, saying it would make for a good story to tell back at the office. Inside, the cabin was dusty and filled with cobwebs. There was old furniture scattered around, and the walls were covered in faded photographs. It looked like no one had been there for years. As we were poking around, we heard that scream again, only this time it was much closer. Tom and I exchanged a nervous glance. Maybe we should head back, I suggested. Tom nodded, and we quickly made our way out of the cabin. The sun was starting to set, and the forest around us felt increasingly ominous. When we got back to the RV, we found it had been ransacked. Our food was scattered everywhere, and the inside was a mess. It looked like an animal had gotten in, but the door was still locked. That didn't make sense. "What the hell did this?" Tom muttered, looking around. "I don't know, but we should probably get out of here," I said, feeling a growing unease. Tom agreed, and we started cleaning up the mess. As we were putting things back in place, we heard the scream again. This time it was unmistakably human and very close. We grabbed our flashlights and cautiously stepped outside, scanning the darkness for any signs of movement. That's when we saw it, a figure, barely visible in the dim light, standing at the edge of the forest. It was tall, with long matted hair and eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. It stood there, watching us. "What the hell is that?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. Tom didn't answer. He just stood there, frozen. The figure moved, slowly stepping closer. It made no sound, and its movements were almost unnatural, like it was gliding rather than walking. "Get back in the RV," Tom finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. We backed up slowly, not taking our eyes off the figure. Once inside, Tom locked the door and grabbed the shotgun he had brought along just in case. I had never been a fan of guns, but at that moment, I was glad he had it. We sat in silence, listening. The only sound was our own breathing. After what felt like an eternity, we heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate footsteps. They circled the RV, then stopped. Suddenly, the RV rocked violently, as if something had rammed into it. We both jumped, and Tom pointed the shotgun at the door. There was another loud bang, and then everything went silent again. "What the hell is going on?" I whispered, my voice shaking. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here," Tom replied, his eyes wide with fear. We waited for what felt like hours, but it was probably only a few minutes. Eventually, the footsteps started again, moving away from the RV. When we were sure it was safe, Tom peeked out the window. "There's nothing there," he said, his voice trembling. "Let's just leave," I said, my nerves frayed. We packed up quickly, not caring about the mess anymore. We just wanted to get out of there. As we were about to start the RV, we heard the scream again, this time coming from the direction of the cabin. Tom looked at me, his face pale. "We can't just leave. What if someone needs help?" "Are you kidding me?" I said, my voice rising. "We need to get the hell out of here." But Tom was already grabbing his flashlight and heading towards the cabin. I cursed under my breath and followed him. The darkness seemed to swallow us as we made our way through the trees. When we reached the cabin, the door was wide open. Inside it was even darker, the shadows dancing in the beam of our flashlights. We stepped inside, calling out to see if anyone was there. No response. We were about to leave when we heard a noise from the back room. It sounded like someone whispering. Tom motioned for me to follow, and we slowly made our way to the back of the cabin. The whispering grew louder, more frantic. We opened the door to the back room and froze. There in the corner was a man. His clothes were torn, and he looked like he hadn't eaten in days. His eyes were wild with fear. "Help me," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Tom and I rushed over to him. "What happened?" Tom asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "It's out there," the man said, his eyes darting around the room. "It's been hunting me." "What's been hunting you?" I asked, dread creeping into my voice. "The Wendigo," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It's a creature from folklore. It hunts humans. It's what's been screaming." Tom and I exchanged a worried glance. We had heard stories about the Wendigo, but we never thought they were real. This guy looked terrified, though, and it was hard to dismiss his fear. "We need to get you out of here," Tom said, helping the man to his feet. As we were making our way out of the cabin, we heard footsteps outside. They were slow and deliberate, just like before. The man's eyes widened with terror. "It's here," he whispered, his voice shaking. We froze, listening. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the door burst open and the figure from before stepped inside. It was tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. It moved with an unnatural grace, its eyes fixed on us. Tom raised the shotgun and fired, but the creature didn't flinch. It kept moving towards us, its gaze locked on the man we had found. The man screamed and tried to run, but the creature was too fast. It grabbed him, dragging him out of the cabin. Tom and I stood there, frozen in shock. We heard the man's screams fading into the distance, and then everything went silent. "We need to leave." "Now," I said, my voice trembling. Tom nodded and we ran back to the RV. We didn't look back, just drove as fast as we could down the narrow dirt roads. The RV bounced and shook, but we didn't care. We just wanted to get as far away from that place as possible. When we finally reached the nearest town, we went straight to the police. They listened to our story but seemed skeptical. They said they would send someone to check the area, but we could tell they didn't believe us. Tom and I never went camping again after that. We went back to our jobs, tried to go back to our normal lives, but things were never the same. We both had nightmares about that night, about the man and the creature that took him. We never found out what happened to him. The police said they found the cabin, but no sign of the man or the creature. They chalked it up to a wild animal attack, but Tom and I knew better. Years later, I did some research and found out more about the Wendigo. It's a creature from Native American folklore, said to be a spirit that possesses humans and turns them into cannibalistic monsters. I don't know if that's what we saw, but it was something close enough. Tom and I still keep in touch, but we don't talk about that night. It's like an unspoken agreement between us. We try to move on, but some things you can't forget. Some things stay with you no matter how hard you try to leave them behind. And every now and then, when I'm alone in the dark, I hear that scream. I know it's just my mind playing tricks on me, but it still sends a chill down my spine. I don't know what we saw out there, but I do know one thing. Whatever it was, it's still out there. Somewhere in the darkness, waiting. Name is Mario Ramos, and I'm 33 years old. And this happened to me on August 23, 2008. It started with the smell, a sweet, sickly scent that hung thick in the air, like rotten fruit and something else, something I couldn't quite place. It was the kind of smell that made your stomach clench and your throat tighten. I'd been on the forest in Crestfall for 5 years, and I'd never smelled anything like it. Crestfall wasn't the kind of town where much happened. We had our share of drunken disorderlies, the occasional domestic dispute, and once a year someone would try to cook meth in their basement and blow themselves up. But that was about it. We weren't exactly Mayberry, but we were close. The call came in just after midnight. A woman frantic saying there was something in her backyard, something big. I was the only one on duty, so I grabbed my flashlight and my service weapon and headed out. The woman's house was on the edge of town, backing up to a stretch of thick woods. The sweet, sickly smell was even stronger here. I could practically taste it in the back of my throat. The woman, Mrs. Alara, was standing on her porch wrapped in a bathrobe, her face pale and drawn. It was just standing there, she said, her voice trembling. In the middle of the yard, just watching the house, I followed her gaze. The backyard was small, just a patch of grass and a swing set. The woods loomed at the back, dark and silent. I scanned the area with my flashlight but saw nothing. "Can you describe it, Mrs. Zalara?" I asked. "It was big," she said, and dark. I couldn't see its face. Great, I thought. Just what I needed. A dark, big something in the middle of the night. I spent the next hour searching the backyard and the surrounding woods but found nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no sign that anything had been there. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Zalara," I said finally. "I can't find anything, but it was there." She insisted. I saw it. I tried to reassure her, told her to call if she saw anything else, and left. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The smell, the woman's fear, it all felt wrong. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. The smell lingered in the air, a constant reminder of the unknown. Then the missing person report came in. A young woman, Elara Greaves, had vanished from her home. Her car was still in the driveway, her purse on the kitchen counter. Elara Greaves was Mrs. Alara's daughter. I went back to the house, this time with a search warrant and a team of officers. We combed through the house, the backyard, the woods. We found nothing. No sign of a struggle, no blood, no clues. It was like she had vanished into thin air. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The case went cold. Elara Greaves was just another name on a long list of missing persons, but I couldn't forget her, or the look on her mother's face. The smell came back a year later. This time it was on the other side of town, near the old abandoned mine. Another missing person report, another young woman. I knew with a sinking feeling in my gut that it was happening again. This time I was prepared. I spent my nights patrolling the area around the mine, my senses on high alert. The smell was a constant presence, a trail of breadcrumbs leading me closer to whatever was out there. Then one night I saw it. It was standing in a clearing bathed in the pale moonlight. It was tall and slender, with long, spindly limbs. Its skin was dark and leathery, its face a blank mask. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, a creature out of a nightmare. It was crouched over something on the ground, something small. Still, I raised my gun, my finger tightening on the trigger. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was responsible for the disappearances. I knew it had to be stopped. I took aim and fired. The shot echoed through the silent woods. The creature looked up, its eyes meeting mine. They were black and empty, devoid of any emotion. It didn't scream, it didn't run. It just stood there, watching me. And then it smiled. The smile sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't a human smile, not the kind that reached the eyes. It was a baring of teeth, a predator's grin. I fired again and again, the bullet studying into its body. It didn't flinch. It took a step toward me, then another. I backed away, my heart pounding against my ribs. This thing, whatever it was, wasn't afraid of me. It wasn't afraid of bullets. I turned and ran, crashing through the undergrowth, the creature's heavy footsteps close behind. I could hear its raspy breathing, smell its foul stench. I stumbled out of the woods and onto the road, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. I didn't stop running until I reached my patrol car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. I got in, slammed the door, and locked it. I looked back at the woods, but the creature was gone. I sat there for a long time, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what I had seen. I knew I had to report it, but who would believe me? A giant bulletproof creature in the woods? They think I was crazy, but I couldn't just do nothing. Alara Greaves and the other missing women, they deserve justice. I drove back to the station, my mind racing. I needed proof. I needed something to show that I wasn't crazy, that what I had seen was real. I went back to the clearing, back to where I had seen the creature. The body was still there, lying crumpled on the ground. It was a young woman, her clothes torn, her face contorted in terror. I examined the body, looking for anything, any clue that could help me identify the creature. There were deep scratches on her arms and legs, like she had been clawed by a wild animal. But these were no ordinary scratches. They were too deep, too precise. Then I saw it, a small, almost invisible mark on her neck. It was a bite mark, 2 small punctures surrounded by a ring of bruised flesh. I knew then what I was dealing with. It wasn't a monster, not in the traditional sense. It was something worse, something ancient, something that had been hiding in the shadows for centuries. A vampire. I knew it sounded crazy, but it was the only explanation that made sense. The strength, the bite marks, it all fit. I took pictures of the body, of the bite marks, of the clearing. I gathered everything I could find, anything that could be used as evidence. I went back to the station and presented my findings to the chief. He listened patiently, his face expressionless. When I was finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. I know you're a good cop, but this is too much. Vampires? Come on. But I have proof, I insisted. The bite marks the witnesses. Witnesses who saw a dark figure in the woods, he interrupted. That's not proof of anything. I knew he was right. It wasn't enough. I needed more. I spent the next few days researching vampires, reading everything I could find. I learned about their strengths, their weaknesses, their history. I learned that they were real and that they were dangerous. I also learned that they could be killed. I gathered everything I needed: garlic, holy water, a wooden stake. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. I went back to the woods, back to the clearing. The smell was stronger than ever. I could feel it in my lungs, in my throat. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. And then it appeared. It was standing in the same spot as before, its eyes fixed on me. It didn't move, didn't speak. It just watched. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. I know what you are, I said, my voice steady, and I know how to kill you. It tilted its head as if curious. I reached into my bag and pulled out the garlic. I held it up, the pungent odor filling the air. The creature hissed, its lips curling back from its teeth. I took another step forward, and another. I was close enough now to see the hunger in its eyes, the thirst for blood. I threw the garlic at its feet. It recoiled as if burned. I took out the holy water and splashed it on its face. It screamed, a high-pitched shriek that echoed through the trees. I pulled out the stake, the wood smooth and cold in my hand. I raised it high above my head. It let out a final, air-splitting shriek, then collapsed to the ground, its body turning to dust. I stood there, panting, the stake still clutched in my hand. It was over. I looked down at the pile of dust, all that was left of the creature. I thought of the Lara Greaves of the other women. I thought of the fear, the pain, the suffering. I took a deep breath and turned away. The sun was rising, casting a warm glow over the woods. The smell was gone, replaced by the fresh scent of pine needles and damp earth. I walked back to my car, feeling the weight of what I had done. I had killed a monster, but I had also taken a life. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never forget the night I faced the vampire in the woods. I drove back to the station and presented the evidence to the chief, the photos, the bite marks, the dust. He studied them carefully, his face grim. "I believe you, Kaysen," he said finally. "You did the right thing." News of the vampire spread like wildfire through Crestfall. People were shocked, scared, but also relieved. The monster in the woods was gone. They called me a hero, but I didn't feel like one. I felt like a man who had done what he had to do. I never told anyone what the creature had whispered to me as I drove the stake into its heart. Nosferatu. I live in Wyoming. It's a great place if you like the outdoors, which I do. I'd been itching to get out for a while, so last month I loaded up my RV and headed for Bighorn National Forest. Most folks go for Yellowstone, but crowds aren't my thing. Bighorn's quiet, the scenery's amazing. Yeah, my kind of place, all right. First few days were exactly what I needed. Hiked up to a place called Bucking Mule Falls, did some fishing. Found a killer spot for the RV way off on a service road. Not a soul in sight for miles. Felt like paradise, honestly. Thought maybe I'd even crack open the book I'd brought along. What kind, you ask? Oh, it's some economics thing. Total nerd out for me. Not everyone's cup of tea. Anyway, third night. That's when things got kind of weird. It was late, I'd had some whiskey to warm up, so I figure it was probably nothing. But I hear this, like scratching sound at the side of the RV. Made me jump, I thought. Damn, must be mice or something. Not a second later, though, there's this thump up on the roof. Heavier, way heavier. Now I'm sweating a little because, come on, what the hell's out there? A bear? Never heard of one getting onto an RV roof. Plus this, it didn't sound quite like claws. More like hands, hearts hammering. I get up real slow. Didn't want to make any sudden noises. Peek out the window. It's pitch dark. Can't see a damn thing. Then I hear it breathing, ragged almost like a man, but deeper, kind of rasping, like somebody's got a real bad throat infection. Chills, man. I swear I get chills right now just thinking about it. The breathing stops, then another thud. Drops off the RV and whatever it is starts pacing around outside. I can hear, well, they sound like footsteps. Heavy ones, but off, you know, like the pattern's a bit too long. Like the thing's legs are longer than they should be. At some point I realize I'm holding my breath. Figure. Better get a handle on things a bit, right? So I go for my flashlight. Best one I've got. Big military-style one. My hands are shaking, but I figure I gotta see what's out there. I count to 3, throw open the curtains, and blast the light out the window. Full-on SWAT team style, I'm telling you. And nothing. Empty. Ground's all torn up, like something big struggled there. But whatever made the tracks is long gone. Now, okay, I'm a reasonable guy. Always have been. I start telling myself, hey, must have been a drunk, wandered off. Hell, maybe it was an animal, just sounded different in the dark. But I didn't buy it. Those steps, that breathing, there was something off about the whole thing. Here's the thing, though. Morning comes, the sun's out, and it's hard to stay worked up. Start figuring I must have imagined half of it. Hell, even the torn-up tracks don't seem as bad in daylight. Probably just a moose or something. That's how I convinced myself to stick it out another night. Big mistake, because that night it came back. I wasn't even asleep. I'm laying in bed getting that weird prickly feeling, like you're being watched. Suddenly there it is, the ragged breathing right outside the window. It's circling, I can tell. Hear the footsteps, heavy and deliberate, and that damn rasping breath, almost like it's sniffing. Then, and this is the part that still makes my skin crawl, there's a click, a scratch, like nails on metal, right against the glass. I flinch back, but it keeps going, slow, back and forth, like the thing is trying to get a look inside. Then a bang hard against the RV and the whole thing shakes. That's when I lose it. I reach for my gun. I'm a good shot. I hunt sometimes, so I'm not worried about missing whatever's out there. All I'm thinking is, scare the living daylights out of it. Make it clear this ain't a place it wants to mess with. I throw open the door, gun out in front. I'm ready to blast whatever comes charging out. I shout, "Get the hell out of here," trying to sound brave even though my legs are shaking like a damn leaf. But again, nothing. I sweep the area with my flashlight. Empty. Now I'm freaked, real freaked, because there's new tracks, big ones like the footprints I saw last night, only deeper, and they lead off into the trees. I stand there, heart pounding, gun raised, waiting for something. Attack? I don't know. The silence is worse than any scream. Worse than anything, because I know this thing, whatever it is still out there watching. And I'm just sitting here like a big fat target in my lit-up RV. For the first time, I don't just feel scared. I feel stupid, outmatched, like I've bitten off way more than I can chew. There's only one sane thing to do. Pack up and get the hell out of there. I do it fast. Fumbling with the keys, hands shaking. Then I floor it out onto the main road. For miles, I keep expecting to see those glowing eyes in the rear-view mirror, that loping figure coming after me. But nothing. I just drive all night and finally stop at some truck stop off the interstate. Figure enough people around to be safe, right? Even there can't relax. I sit in a booth drinking bad coffee, jumping at every sound. I call my brother Arden. He's an ex-army guy, so I figure he'll level with me, tell me if I'm overreacting. Instead, he just listens, real serious. Then he says, "You remember Ed? Ed was a buddy of ours, died in Afghanistan, IED or something." Well, Arden goes, "He told me something once out there in the mountains patrols. He saw things they weren't supposed to talk about." His voice gets real quiet. "When you told me about the breathing, that clicked for me." I ask, "So what, Arden? What are you saying?" And he says, "I'm saying if you saw what you think you saw, well, maybe there's reasons those places stay empty. Maybe the folks who live out there know better than to mess with whatever's in the darkness." I don't sleep that night. I don't sleep much for nights after. I'm jumpy, seeing things at the edge of my vision. I keep the gun close, even in the damn shower. My buddy Cade thinks I might be losing it a little. I'm thinking the same damn thing, to be honest. A couple weeks ago, I decided to go back. Not back to Bighorn, mind you, but to my RV. Figured I can't just let it sit there. Took Cade and his rifle with me, just in case. All daytime, though, so felt a bit better. We pull up to the spot, and that's when it really hits me. The place gives me some serious willies now. There's this feeling like it's waiting, like whatever the hell was out there. It's expecting me back. Cade looks at me. "You sure about this man place? Looks kind of..." Yeah, I cut him off, 'cause what else I'm gonna do, leave my RV to rot? I get the keys out, start for the door, when I stop. There, in the dirt right by the step, it's a handprint. It looks human, but it ain't. Too big for one thing, the finger's too damn long. And those nails, like claws, black, like they were dug into something still living. "Cade," I say, my voice kind of squeaky. Look at that." He bends down, his face goes real pale. "Jesus, man, what the hell is that?" He points to another mark I hadn't even noticed. "Look, it looks like the thing was trying to climb up to the window. It's been weeks now, and I still don't know exactly what I saw up there. But I'll tell you this, I won't be going back, not ever." And yeah, I sold the RV. Sometimes late at night I still hear that scratch at the window, and I wake in a cold sweat, remembering that awful, ragged breath. My name is Miguel Rios, and I am 28 years old. This happened to me on July 22, 2008. Got a 10:32 in progress, officer down, requesting backup. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio, a harsh intrusion on the quiet hum of my patrol car. 1032 meant trouble, cop in danger, and lukewarm coffee. Unit 17 responding, I replied, flipping on the siren, the wail slicing through the early morning stillness of the Nevada desert. The call came from a remote stretch of highway, miles from anything resembling civilization. Just me, the endless ribbon of asphalt, and the rising sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. I pushed the accelerator, the patrol car eating up the miles. Reaching the scene, I found the other officer's car parked haphazardly, door hanging open like a broken wing. No sign of him, just an eerie silence broken by the wind whistling through the dry brush. I drew my weapon, the familiar weight of comfort in my hand. Unit 17 on scene. I reported, my voice tight. The silence answered. Then a lone moan like a wounded animal coming from the ditch beside the road. I moved cautiously, gun leading the way. A figure lay sprawled in the dirt, uniform torn and bloodied. It was Officer Miller, a rookie, barely a year on the force. He was still breathing, but just barely, glazed with pain. It got him. He gasped, voiced raspy, took him into the dark. Before I could ask what he meant, his eyes rolled back and he went still. Dead. I scanned the area, searching for any sign of what had attacked him. Nothing. Just the endless desert stretching out under the pale morning light. Back in my car, I called it in. Another unit arrived, along with the coroner and a couple of detectives. They looked at the scene, at Miller's body, then at me, their faces grim. Animal attack, one of the detectives asked, his voice skeptical. That's what it looks like, I said, but I wasn't convinced. There were no animal tracks, no signs of a struggle, just Miller lying dead in the dirt. The next few days were a blur of investigations and reports. The official cause of death was listed as animal attack, though no one could say what kind of animal could have done this. The case went cold, another unsolved mystery in the vastness of the Nevada desert. But I couldn't let it go. Something about Miller's last words, the fear in his eyes, kept gnawing at me. I started spending my off-duty hours combing through missing person reports, old legends, anything that might offer a clue. That's when I stumbled upon it. A local legend about a creature that stalled the desert, a creature that snatched people away in the night. The locals called it the Night Walker. I dismissed it at first as just a story, a way for people to explain the disappearances that sometimes happened in these remote parts. But as I dug deeper, I found more and more accounts, spanning decades, all describing the same thing. A tall, gaunt figure with long arms and razor-sharp claws. I started patrolling the area where Miller was found, especially at night. I drove the lonely stretches of highway, my eyes scanning the darkness, my hand always on my gun. I felt like a fool chasing shadows, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there. Then one night I saw it. I was parked on a deserted stretch of road, engine idling, when a movement caught my eye. A tall, thin figure emerged from the darkness, its silhouette stark against the moonlit sky. It was moving with an unnatural, its long limbs swinging like pendulums. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it on the figure. It stopped, turning its head towards me. The light revealed a face that was both human and not, with sharp features, sunken eyes, and a mouth full of needle-like teeth. Fear, cold and primal, gripped me. This was no animal. This was something else, something beyond comprehension. It let out a low growl, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. Then it turned and melted back into the darkness as quickly as it had appeared. I sat there for a long time, heart pounding, trying to process what I had seen. I knew no one would believe me. They would think I was crazy, seeing things in the desert. But I knew what I had seen. The Nightwalker was real, and it was out there, somewhere in the darkness, waiting for its next victim. This happened to me in 1980. My name is Aaron Rosales, and I'm 37 years old, a park ranger. Not the kind you see on those cheesy nature shows, mind you. More like the kind that battles mosquitoes the size of hummingbirds and tourists who think a selfie stick is a weapon against a grizzly. But this story isn't about the usual nuisances of the job. It's about something else entirely. Something that still makes the hair on my arm stand on end when I think about it. It was a late summer day in Glacier National Park. The tourists were thinning out, leaving the park to us rangers and the creatures who called it home. I was on my usual patrol, checking the trails for stragglers and ensuring no one had left behind a burning campfire. As I hiked deeper into the park, a sense of unease started to creep over me. The usual sounds of the forest seemed muted, replaced by an eerie silence. The shadows seemed longer, darker. I shook it off as nerves, chalking it up to too much coffee and not enough sleep. Rounding a bend in the trail, I saw something that made my heart leap into my throat. It was a figure, hunched over a deer carcass. At first I thought it was a bear, but as I got closer I realized it was something else, something I'd never seen before. It was humanoid, but not quite human. Its skin was pale and leathery, stretched tight over its gaunt frame. Its limbs were long and spindly, ending in gnarled claws that were tearing into the deer's flesh. Its head was elongated, with a wide, lipless mouth filled with jagged teeth. I froze, unable to move or make a sound. The creature seemed oblivious to my presence, consumed by its grisly feast. I watched in horror as it ripped the deer apart, its movements quick and efficient. After what felt like an eternity, the creature finished its meal. It stood up, its head swiveling back and forth as if searching for something. I ducked behind a tree, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature turned its head towards me, its eyes glowing in the dim light. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't see me. But it did. It let out a low growl and started towards me. I stumbled back, my legs heavy with fear. I turned and ran, the creature's growls echoing through the trees. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached. I didn't stop until I reached the ranger station, bursting through the door and slamming it shut behind me. My fellow rangers stared at me, alarmed by my disheveled appearance and panicked breaths. I told them what I'd seen, but they dismissed it as exhaustion and stress. I knew they didn't believe me, but I didn't care. I knew what I'd seen, and I knew I wouldn't rest until I found out what it was. The next day, I returned to the spot where I'd seen the creature. The deer carcass was gone, leaving only a blood-stained patch of earth. I searched the area looking for any sign of the creature, but found nothing. I spent the next few days combing the park, but there was no trace of the creature. I started to doubt myself, wondering if I had imagined the whole thing. But then one night I heard a scream. It came from the direction of the campground. I grabbed my flashlight and radio and raced towards the sound. I found a young couple huddled together in their tent, their faces pale with terror. They told me they'd seen something outside their tent, something tall and thin with glowing eyes. I knew then that I wasn't crazy. The creature was real, and it was still out there. I organized a search party, but we found nothing. The creature seemed to have vanished into thin air. We increased patrols and warned campers to be vigilant, but the creature remained elusive. It was as if it knew we were looking for it and was staying one step ahead. The park became a place of fear and unease. Campers left in droves and the trails were deserted. The creature's presence hung over the park like a dark cloud. One day I was hiking alone in a remote part of the park when I saw it again. It was standing at the edge of a clearing, its eyes fixed on me. This time I was prepared. I had my gun drawn and my finger on the trigger. The creature let out a growl and charged. I fired, hitting it in the shoulder. It stumbled but kept coming. I fired again, hitting it in the chest. This time it fell to the ground, its body twitching and convulsing. I approached cautiously, my gun still trained on it, but the creature was dead. Its blood was black and viscous, and its muscles were incredibly dense. We took samples and sent them to a lab for analysis, but the results were inconclusive. The creature remained a mystery. The park slowly returned to normal, but the memory of the creature lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't seen the last of it. I continued to patrol the park, always on the lookout for any sign of the creature, but it never returned. Maybe it was dead for good, or maybe it was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. I didn't know, and that's what scared me the most. The events of that summer left a mark on me. I became more cautious, more aware of my surroundings. I never hiked alone again, and I always carried my gun. I left Glacier National Park a few years later, but I never forgot the creature I encountered there. it remains a chilling reminder of the mysteries that still lurk in the wilderness. I often wonder what it was, where it came from, and why it was there. I've heard stories of similar creatures from other parts of the world, but none that match the one I saw. Maybe it was a new species, undiscovered by science, or maybe it was something else entirely, something beyond our understanding. Whatever it was real, and it was dangerous. I'm just grateful I lived to tell the tale. My name is Omar Salazar, and I am 31 years old, and this happened to me on November 14th, 2009. I'd been a cop in Beckley, West Virginia for 5 years, long enough to know the town's rhythm. Beckley wasn't a bad place, just a quiet one nestled in the Appalachian Mountains. The biggest excitement we usually got was a drunk miner on a Saturday night, or a black bear rummaging through someone's trash. But that November, things took a turn. It started with missing persons reports, hikers mostly. They'd go up into the mountains and vanish. Search parties found nothing, not a trace. Then livestock started turning up dead, ripped apart. Folks started whispering about mountain lions, but I wasn't so sure. Mountain lions were rare in these parts. One chilly afternoon, I got a call. A hiker had found something near Piney Creek. I grabbed my partner, a laconic old-timer named Grady, and we headed out. The leaves were turning, painting the mountains in fiery hues of red and orange. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. We found the hiker, a skinny guy with a scraggly beard, sitting on a rock, his face pale. He pointed us towards the creek. There, half hidden among the rocks and fallen leaves, was a body. A young woman, her hiking clothes torn, her face frozen in a silent scream. Grady checked for a pulse, but it was no use. She was gone. Her wounds were unlike anything I'd ever seen. Deep, ragged gashes like she'd been torn apart by some wild animal. But the bite marks were too big, too powerful for any mountain lion. We secured the scene and called it in. The news spread like wildfire through Beckley. Fear settled over the town like a thick fog. People started locking their doors, avoiding the woods. Over the next few days, more bodies turned up. The killings were always the same. Hikers found near water, their bodies mangled. The press descended on Beckley, calling it the work of a mountain devil. Grady and I worked day and night, following every lead, checking every trail. We interviewed hunters, hikers, anyone who might have seen something. The pressure was on. The mayor, a portly man with a receding hairline, called me into his office. "People are scared. We're doing everything we can, Mayor," I replied. "Do more," he said, his eyes hard, "or this town will bleed dry." I left his office, frustration gnawing at me. We were up against something we didn't understand, something that moved like a shadow through the mountains. We were hunting a ghost. One evening, Grady and I were combing the woods near where the latest victim had been found. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the trees. The wind rustled the leaves, creating an eerie symphony. "Jamari," Grady said, his voice low, "you hear that?" I listened. There was a sound, faint but unmistakable, a low growl, deep and guttural, that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. We followed the sound, moving cautiously through the undergrowth. The growl grew louder, closer. We came to a clearing, and there, in the fading light, we saw it. It was massive, easily twice the size of any bear I'd ever seen. Its fur was matted and dark, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. Its claws were its teeth like rows of sharpened knives. It stood over the body of a deer, its jaws dripping with blood. The creature looked up, its eyes meeting mine. For a moment we were locked in a silent standoff, predator and prey. Then, with a snarl, it turned and vanished into the darkness. We didn't speak as we walked back to the car. The image of the creature burned into our minds. We knew what we were dealing with now. It wasn't a mountain lion, not a bear. It was something else, something ancient and evil that had awakened in the mountains. The next day, we gathered a posse of hunters and trackers, armed with rifles and shotguns. We were going to hunt the hunter, track it down and kill it before it could claim another victim. We set off into the mountains, following the trail of blood and carnage it had left behind. We tracked the creature for days, through dense forests and over rocky ridges. The weather turned, the sky growing heavy with snow. The wind howled through the trees, whipping the snow into a blinding blizzard. We were tired, cold, and hungry, but we pressed on. We had to stop it. On the fourth day we found it. It was holed up in a cave, a dark maw in the side of the mountain. We could hear its growls echoing from within. We surrounded the cave, our hearts pounding in our chests. Grady and I took the lead, our rifles raised. We stepped into the darkness, the cold air heavy with the stench of death. The cave was vast, the walls slick with moisture. We moved slowly, our flashlights cutting through the gloom. The growls grew louder, closer. Then we saw it. It was crouched in the back of the cave, its eyes burning like coals in the darkness. Its massive body was covered in scars, its fur matted with blood. It snarled, its teeth bared in a silent challenge. Gravy raised his rifle, aiming for the creature's head. I did the same. My finger tightening on the trigger. We were about to fire when the cave entrance behind us exploded in a shower of rocks and debris. We spun around, our rifles swinging towards the new threat. Standing there, silhouetted against the snowstorm outside, was another creature. It was bigger than the first, its fur a sickly pale color, its eyes like black pits. It let out a deafening roar, the sound bouncing off the cave walls. We were trapped, caught between two monsters. "Grady," I yelled, my voice barely audible over the din. "Back to back." We turned, our rifles aimed at the two creatures. The first one lunged, its claws reaching for me. I fired, the bullet tearing through its shoulder. It roared in pain and stumbled back. The second creature charged at Grady, its jaws snapping. Grady fired, but the bullet only grazed its thick hide. The creature slammed into him, sending him sprawling. I fired again and again, each shot finding its mark. The first creature fell, its body twitching in its death throes. I turned to Grady, but it was too late. The second creature had him pinned, its teeth tearing into his flesh. Rage and grief surged through me. I emptied my rifle into the creature, the bullets ripping through its body. It let out a final air-splitting roar before collapsing on top of Grady. I stumbled over to Grady, my heart heavy. He was still alive, but barely. His eyes met mine, a flicker of recognition in their depths. He whispered, his voice raspy, "Kill the other one." I nodded, tears blurring my vision. I turned to the first creature, which was still twitching on the cave floor. I put a bullet through its head, ending its misery. Then I knelt beside Grady, holding his hand as his life slipped away. "It's all right, Grady," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "It's over." He closed his eyes and took one last, shuddering breath. I stayed with him for a long time, the silence of the cave broken only by the drip of water and the howl of the wind outside. Eventually I knew I had to leave. I had to get help, tell the others what had happened. I stumbled out of the cave, the snow swirling around me. I made it back to town, my body numb with cold and exhaustion. I told the others what I had seen, what had happened to Grady. At first they didn't believe me. They thought I was crazy, that the stress had gotten to me. But then they saw the bodies of the creatures hauled back to town by a team of men. The sight of those monstrous corpses silenced all doubts. The town was in shock, but also in relief. The nightmare was over. Grady was hailed as a hero, a martyr who had given his life to save the town. I was given a medal, a symbol of my bravery. But it felt hollow. All I could think about was Grady, his wry smile, his quiet courage. In the aftermath, scientists came to Beckley to study the creatures. They were baffled. The creatures didn't match any known species. They were like something out of a nightmare, a throwback to a prehistoric age. As for me, I left Beckley soon after. I couldn't stay there, not with the memories haunting me. I moved out west, to a small town in Montana where the mountains were vast and the skies endless. I still think about Grady, about the creatures, about the horrors we faced in that cave, and I wonder, are there more of them out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike? I don't know, but I do know this. The world is a stranger place than we think, full of mysteries and dangers we can scarcely imagine. And sometimes the things that go bump in the night are real. I suppose now, after all these years, I can finally put a name to those creatures, Wendigos. They fit the description, the legends, the way they stult and killed. I still carry the scars, physical and mental, of that encounter. But I also carry the memory of Grady, a reminder of the courage it takes to face the darkness and the sacrifices that sometimes have to be made. Before my best friends and I were separated, one passed away, the other moved away. We used to ride around doing all of the haunted legend places within reasonable driving distances. Sometimes we'd drive a few hours, but most of them weren't scary, other than the adrenaline-filled, hyped-up, "Did you hear and see that?" That would cause us to get spooked. This one was different, way different. We were just out of high school, probably 20 at most, and we were looking for an actually scary place to visit. A lot of the people we knew we were into these kinds of things, so we'd always get tips on where to go. There was the original 3 of us that day, and another friend that wanted to tag along. After a little drive to our destination, about 45 minutes, we stopped at a Wawa to get gas and grab a few snacks. Like I stated earlier, we were all about 20 at the time, so we were all hyped up because we knew spooky time was getting close. We'd always pick on that other friend that tagged along, nothing harsh, just, "You're scared." So I believe it was me that said something along those lines that was overheard by a few people. It got the attention of a few people in the Wawa, including these 2 creepy older guys, who seemed like they didn't fit in. Their clothes were all beat up and dirty, and they just didn't seem right for the area, and time it was, probably 8 p.m. on a Saturday night. "What's the little one scared of?" asked one of the guys. I say little because the 3 of us are all abnormally tall. The shortest between us 3 was 6'4", and he was normal height, probably about 5'9". We replied and explained how we got tipped to go to this road because it's haunted. They replied that it wasn't that scary, and if we wanted a real scare that we should go to this random road. I forget what it was called exactly, but apparently there's this random memorial statue for a plane crash in the middle of the woods that crazy things are supposed to happen at. We grabbed our stuff and didn't think anything of it. As soon as we left, the group started talking and decided to go with the other road that those guys hyped up. I know, a typical horror movie, what not to do. So we get to the entrance of the road, and it already did not disappoint. Woods on both sides, not one damn streetlight in sight. And I remember there was like a detention center off to the right, in the middle of nowhere. So the spooks already began the second we hit the entrance. We decided to drive down the road and search for the statue. We noticed that there were trees cut down on the side of the road and laying parallel to the shoulder of the road. We finally find the statue. About 5 minutes go by of silence, and we decided to enhance the scare factor by shutting the lights off. About a minute goes by, and we see a shadow figure pop out from the statue. We all freak out as it starts walking towards us, but it was making movements that no human would be normally capable of. It was dark out, but this thing was black. It was darker than the woodsy sky, so we could make out some of it. This thing was huge. Like I said earlier, we were all extremely large compared to the average guy, but this thing would have dwarfed any of us. We decided to peel out of there and continue down the road, figuring it would lead us out of there. Boy, were we wrong. About 3 minutes go by and we hit a dead end, which in this case was an open spot in the woods with sand everywhere. The cutout was massive, but surrounded by woods. There was different cutouts and ways to go from there, and I'm pretty sure the road continued after this cutout. But we were pretty deep in the woods at this point, so we decided to turn around there and obviously leave. After we turn around, we stop just to take in the eerie feeling. The other 3 guys were talking about the shadow we saw earlier, while I happened to catch something out of the corner of my eye. About 40 feet away from me, I see what appears to be a white face, and then another and another, all surrounding the car. The other guys didn't see them, and I rarely ever get scared, but seeing me panic, they knew something was up. My panic caused them to panic, all panicking now. We then floor it far away from the sand turnaround. We get about half a mile down the road, somewhat near the statue, and pull over to gather our composure to get out of there. When we stopped, I swear I heard the typical ghost "ooh" noise. This was now turning into a movie I wish I was never a part of. So we are really scared now. After finding the way we came, we started heading back out. Remember those trees I talked about earlier? They were now laying in the middle of the road, blocking us in, as we all see the white faces, masks, that I saw earlier. Thank God my one friend, driver, was good at driving and valued safety over his car. We drove on the edge of the woods what felt like we were defying gravity to speed our way out. The car was literally sideways, on the edge of the woods. I could literally stick a single finger out the window and touch the trees. We all made it home safely that night. After doing research, we found out that that spot was notorious in that area for crazy things happening such as body dumps and murders. Because of the shadow and the ghost noise we heard, my head, heart, and gut tells me that that place is actually haunted. As previously stated, that place is famous for dumping bodies, along with the plane crash 100 years ago. So there's bound to be some spirits there. I think where we were that night was actually haunted. We just happened to be there on a night where there was more things going on. I can't help but think that evil-looking shadow from the statue was actually an angel in disguise trying to scare us away from the doom that was upon us. I can't say for certain, but I'm 99% sure we survived one of their setups that night. But what I'm 100% sure, I will never go back again. I got chills just typing this, and I never tell this story. There were 4 of us there. One took our story to the grave, and I'm sure the rest of us won't speak much about it either. Whenever we even bring it up in front of people, we always use the code THMTW, so that we don't have to actually talk about it. THMTW, of course, stands for the horror movie that wasn't. Thanks for reading. Feel free to ask questions. I'll answer to the best of my ability. My name is Jose Rodriguez, and I am 34 years old. And what I'm about to tell you happened back in the summer of 1995. I was 28, recently divorced, and trying to find myself again. My cousin Horace and I decided to spend a weekend hiking in the Ozarks. We'd grown up together in Missouri, and these mountains held a lot of memories for us, mostly good ones. We figured some fresh air and a little adventure would be the perfect way to clear our heads. Horace had always been the outdoors type, while I was more of a city guy. I worked as a mechanic in Kansas City, fixing cars and getting greasy every day. My ex-wife used to joke that I loved my wrench set more than her, and maybe she wasn't wrong. But here I was, trudging up a mountain trail with a pack on my back, trying to prove I could be more than just a grease monkey. We started our hike from a small town called Jasper. It's a quiet place, tucked away from the hustle and bustle, with locals who wave at strangers and a diner that serves the best apple pie I've ever tasted. Horace and I hit the trail early, laughing and reminiscing about our teenage years, when we'd camp out in his backyard and tell ghost stories until we fell asleep. The first day was uneventful. We set up camp by a stream, roasted some hot dogs, and cracked open a couple of beers. The air was cool, and the sound of water running over the rocks was soothing. It felt good to be away from everything, to just sit and breathe without worrying about the next day's work or the awkward silences of a failed marriage. The second day, we decided to push deeper into the woods. Horace had this crazy idea about finding an old cabin our granddad had built back in the 1940s. We weren't sure if it was still standing or even if we were heading in the right direction, but it gave us something to aim for. The deeper we went, the denser the forest became. The path, if you could even call it that, was overgrown and difficult to follow. We hacked our way through with machetes, joking about how we were modern-day explorers. By late afternoon, the sun dipped below the treetops, casting long shadows that made everything look eerie and unfamiliar. We finally stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a dilapidated cabin, barely recognizable under a thick blanket of ivy and moss. The roof had caved in on one side, and the windows were long gone. But it was there, a relic of our family's past. "Well, I'll be damned," Horace said, wiping sweat from his brow. We found it. We set up camp nearby, deciding to spend the night there. As we unpacked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I brushed it off as nerves. After all, we were miles from civilization, and the woods have a way of playing tricks on your mind. Night fell, and we lit a fire, cooking up some beans and sharing a flask of whiskey Horace had brought along. We talked about the old days, about our granddad and the stories he'd tell us about this place. We laughed, but it felt forced. The feeling of being watched was growing stronger. Around midnight, we heard a rustling in the bushes. We both froze, staring into the darkness beyond the firelight. "Probably just a raccoon," Horace said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Then came the smell, pungent and rotten, like something long dead. I gagged, covering my nose with my shirt. "What the hell is that?" I whispered. Horace shook his head, reaching for the hunting rifle he'd brought along. We heard another rustle, this time closer, followed by a low guttural sound that made my blood run cold. It wasn't any animal I knew. "Stay here," Horace said, standing up and aiming the rifle towards the noise. I wanted to stop him, tell him to sit back down, but my voice caught in my throat. He took a step towards the darkness, and then another. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the trees. Suddenly there was a blur of motion, a massive shape lunging from the darkness. Horace fired a shot, but it was too late. The thing, whatever it was, hit him with the force of a freight train, sending him sprawling to the ground. I heard a scream, his scream cut off abruptly. I scrambled back, falling over my own feet as the creature turned its gaze towards me. It was huge, covered in matted fur, with eyes that gleamed like hot coals. For a moment we were frozen in place, staring at each other. Then it moved, fast and fluid, like a shadow come to life. I grabbed a burning log from the fire and swung it wildly, more out of panic than any real strategy. The thing snarled, recoiling from the flames. I used the moment to run, tearing through the forest, branches whipping at my face. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like hours, my lungs burning, legs aching. I tripped and fell, rolling down a slope and landing hard at the bottom. Dazed, I looked around, realizing I was lost. The forest was silent, save for my ragged breathing. I tried to gather my thoughts, figure out which way to go. But everything looked the same in the dark. I stumbled to my feet, picking a direction at random and moving as quickly and quietly as I could. Hours passed, and the adrenaline began to wear off, replaced by exhaustion and fear. My mind raced, replaying the attack over and over. Horace was dead. He had to be. That thing, whatever it was, had killed him. And it was still out there, hunting me. Just as dawn began to break, I found a dirt road. I followed it, hoping it would lead to help. Eventually, I stumbled upon a ranger station. I must have looked like a man bursting in, babbling about monsters and attacks. The rangers listened, though their expressions were skeptical. They radioed for help, and soon a search party was organized. I was taken to a nearby hospital, treated for my injuries, and questioned by the local authorities. I told them everything I could remember, though it felt like a fever dream. They searched the woods for days, but found no trace of Horace or the creature. The cabin was just as we'd left it, but there were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no tracks. It was like we'd imagined the whole thing. Weeks turned into months, and the search was eventually called off. Horace was declared missing, presumed dead. I returned to Kansas City, haunted by the memories of that night. People looked at me differently, some with pity, others with suspicion. I couldn't blame them. My story was unbelievable, even to me. Sometimes late at night I still hear that low, guttural sound, and the smell of rot and decay fills my nostrils. I moved away from Missouri, hoping distance would help, but the nightmares followed me. To this day, I don't know what we encountered in those woods. Some nights I convinced myself it was just a bear or a mountain lion, something explainable. But deep down I know the truth. There's something out there, something ancient and hungry, lurking in the shadows of the Ozarks. I guess the lesson here, if there is one, is to trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. And if you ever find yourself deep in the woods, far from civilization, remember this story. Stay vigilant, stay safe, and for God's sake, never hike alone. The fall of 1977 found me hitting the backroads of Tennessee. Call me Carter. I've always loved that old school RV life, something about the freedom of the open road. Problem was, this trip felt off. Couldn't put my finger on it, just something in the back of my mind, like I wasn't exactly alone out there. First night out, stopped in the Cherokee National Forest. It's massive, a whole lot of nothing but trees and hills. Anyway, around 3 a.m. something woke me up. Can't say what, but my skin prickled like those nights you swear something's breathing down your neck. I grabbed my flashlight, peered out the window. Nothing. Still, that feeling gnawed at me. By morning, the dread was heavier. Figured it was nerves, so I decided to move on. Took a hike to clear my head, maybe 4 or 5 miles in. When I got back to camp, that's when things got truly weird. There, dug into the mud around my RV, were a set of tracks. Big ones, boots, probably men's size 12 or so. What spooked me wasn't just the tracks, it was how fresh they looked. I hadn't been gone that long. Seemed someone or something had been circling my camper while I was out. I got my bearings, tried to figure out where the tracks headed off to. No luck. The forest's thick there, whoever made them disappeared like a ghost. My .38 started feeling real light in my hand, I tell you. Nervous hell. I spent hours checking around my RV, expecting to see eyes glinting in the trees. That night I didn't get a wink of sleep. Every snap, every rustle. Sure, it was footsteps. Started hearing whispers too, just out of reach, like someone murmuring right on the other side of the RV's thin wall. Couldn't make out the words, but the tone was pure malice. Tried to tell myself these were just tricks of the mind, but deep down I knew better. Next morning I couldn't take it anymore. Had to get out of there. While prepping to leave, I found something carved into the back of the RV, deep into the metal, watching. No way in hell I was sticking around to find out what the hell that was about. I threw the RV into drive, heart in my throat. That was just the start. For days I swore I saw glimpses of someone just out of sight. A glimpse of a face in my rearview mirror, the flicker of a shadow behind a tree I passed. My stomach was in permanent knots. Then came the real nightmare. I stopped in one of those dinky little gas stations off the highway. Figured a public place was the safest. Inside, I was browsing the aisles, trying to find something, anything to calm my nerves. I looked up and almost jumped out of my skin. A guy was staring at me through the grimy window. Tall, built like a brick house, face hidden under a ball cap, but I felt his stare straighten my bones. Then he gave me this sickening smile, all teeth, no warmth. He mouthed the words, "I found you." A chill went straight down my spine. I darted out of there, barely remembering to pay, slammed the RV door and peeled out of that gas station like a bat out of hell. For the next 2 days I didn't stop, barely slept, barely ate, figured I was headed for a breakdown if I didn't get some help. Finally reached a decent-sized town. Name was Jasper. Pulled right into the local sheriff's station, figuring the police could sort this mess out. Told them everything. The tracks, the whispers, the guy at the gas station. Here's where things get worse. When I described the man, the deputy young guy, name tag Reed Miller, his face went pale. Seemed he recognized the description. Then, real low, he tells me they've had missing persons reports. Hikers, campers, just vanishing in the woods. Never been solved. Miller couldn't tell me anything else, said it was an ongoing investigation. But the look he gave me, it said everything I needed to know. Now I don't know what's going on out there. Is there one creep or a whole group of them? Are they connected to the missing folks? Maybe some kind of cult? Whatever it is, I'm never stepping foot in those woods again. Sometimes when I'm on the road late at night, I glance in the mirror and my blood runs cold, because for just a split second I think I see him out there, that same hungry smile lurking in the shadows. This happened to me in '80, the summer I traded the stifling humidity of Atlanta for the towering pines of Sequoia National Park. My name is Marcos Morales and I am 30 years old. Always had a thing for the wilderness. Maybe it was the quiet, maybe the solitude. City life never did suit me. Sequoia was a different beast than the Georgia backwoods I'd grown up in. The trees were giants, older than history itself, casting long shadows that felt like a different kind of time. I was a rookie ranger, green as the moss on those ancient trunks, but eager to learn the ropes. The first few weeks were routine, patrolling trails, checking permits, the usual song and dance. But then, one blistering afternoon, a call crackled over the radio. A hiker had stumbled upon something strange. It wasn't bear trouble or a lost kid. Whatever it was, it had them spooked. I drove out to the Grizzly Gulch trailhead, the sun beating down on my truck like a blacksmith's hammer. The hiker, a pale, skinny guy with a Yosemite Sam mustache, was waiting for me, shaking like a leaf. He mumbled something about a creature, something not right, lurking in the woods. I took his statement, tried to calm him down with a canteen of water and a few reassuring words. But the fear in his eyes, it stuck with me. Figured I'd better check it out, rule out any real danger. I hiked up the trail, the silence broken only by the crunch of pine needles under my boots. The gulch was known for its wildlife, but this felt different. The air hung heavy, the shadows deeper. I kept my hand on my holster, a cold comfort against the growing unease. After a mile or so, I saw it. Not the creature itself, but its mark. A tree snapped clean in half like a toothpick. The break was fresh, the wood still sappy. Whatever did this had strength beyond anything natural. I pushed on, my senses on high alert. The trail wound deeper into the gulch, the trees closing in like a cathedral. The light faded, the air grew colder. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched. Then I heard it, a rustling in the underbrush, a heavy thud like footsteps, but not the kind you'd expect from a deer or a bear. These were slower, deliberate. I froze, pounding in my chest. The rustling got closer, the thuds louder. I drew my gun, the metal cold against my sweaty palm. The underbrush parted, and it stepped out. It was humanoid, vaguely shaped like a man, but twisted, wrong. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over bulging muscles. Its eyes were black pits, devoid of light or life. It had no clothes, no weapons, just its bare, unnatural form. I raised my gun, my voice barely a whisper. "Stop right there. Identify yourself." It didn't respond. It just stood there, staring at me with those empty eyes. Then it lunged. It was fast, faster than anything human. I fired, the gunshot echoing through the trees. The creature stumbled, a dark ichor oozing from its wound, but it didn't stop. It tackled me, its weight crushing my ribs. We rolled on the ground, a tangle of limbs in desperation. It clawed at me, its nails tearing through my uniform. I fought back, punching, kicking, trying to find a weakness, but it was like fighting a machine, relentless and unyielding. It got a hold of my arm, its grip like a vice. I screamed as it twisted, the bones snapping with a sickening crack. I tasted blood, my own, and the metallic tang of the creature's ichor. In a moment of desperation, I grabbed a rock and smashed it against the creature's head. It made a sound, a wet, gurgling noise, and its grip loosened. I scrambled away, my body screaming in pain. The creature lay still, its chest heaving. I didn't wait to see if it was dead. I stumbled back down the trail, the trees a blur, the pain a dull roar in my ears. I made it back to the trailhead, my uniform torn, my arm dangling uselessly. The hiker was long gone, smart man. I radioed for help, the words slurring in my mouth. They found me hours later, delirious and shivering. They airlifted me out, patched me up. The arm never healed right, a constant reminder of that day in the gulch. The official story was a bear attack, a cover-up to avoid panic. But I knew the truth. I'd seen it, fought it, felt its inhuman strength. I quit the Park Service shortly after, the wilderness losing its allure. I settled down, got a desk job, tried to forget. But the nightmares came, the creature's empty eyes staring at me in the darkness. I never went back to Sequoia. I never told anyone the full story, not until now. Maybe it's the guilt, the feeling that I let something loose on that mountain. Or maybe it's just the need to share the burden, to let the world know what lurks in the shadows. Whatever the reason, I can't keep it any longer. This is my truth, my confession, my warning. Beware the wilderness, for it holds secrets darker than you can imagine. And if you ever hear a rustling in the underbrush, a heavy thud in the silence, run. Run as fast as you can and don't look back. My name is Alejandro Flores, and I am 29 years old. And this happened to me on October 14th, 2011. I'm not much for writing, but I wanted to get this down while it's still fresh. So I'd been planning this camping trip with my buddies for a few months. We were all due for some time off, and I figured an RV trip would be the perfect getaway. The place we picked was the Black Hills in South Dakota. Not many people go there this time of year, and that's just how we liked it. My friends Paul and Dennis were excited too. Paul's a tall guy, used to play college basketball. Dennis, on the other hand, is short and stocky, but what he lacks in height he makes up for with a loud personality. I picked them up and we set off in my old RV, joking and laughing the whole way. We arrived at the campsite in the early afternoon. It was a small clearing surrounded by dense trees, and the nearest town was about 20 miles away. The place was quiet, almost too quiet, but we didn't mind. We set up camp, got the fire going, and cracked open some beers. We spent the evening talking about old times, our jobs, and our plans for the future. It was good to be away from everything, just us and the wilderness. After a few hours, Paul suggested we go for a night hike. I wasn't too keen on the idea, but Dennis was all for it. "Come on, Randy, where's your sense of adventure?" Dennis teased. Reluctantly, I agreed. We grabbed some flashlights and set off into the woods. The night was clear and the moon provided some light, but the forest was dark and eerie. We walked for about half an hour, joking around and making fun of each other's nerves. Then we heard it. Rustling noise coming from the bushes ahead. "Probably just a deer," Paul said, though he didn't sound convinced. We pressed on, but the noise persisted. It seemed to be following us, keeping pace just out of sight. Suddenly, Dennis stopped. "Did you guys see that?" he whispered. I looked where he was pointing, and for a brief moment I saw a shadow dart between the trees. "Let's head back," I said, feeling a knot form in my stomach. We turned around and started walking back to the RV, but the feeling of being watched stayed with us. The rustling grew louder, more insistent. Paul quickened his pace, and Dennis and I followed suit. We reached the RV, and I locked the door behind us, heart pounding. Maybe it was just an animal, Paul suggested, but we all knew it didn't feel right. We stayed inside the rest of the night, not talking much. I barely slept, every noise outside making me jump. The next morning, things seemed normal again. We laughed off the night's events, attributing it to our overactive imaginations. We spent the day hiking and exploring the area, taking photos and enjoying the fresh air. By the evening, the previous night's fear seemed like a distant memory. As the sun set, we built another fire and settled in for another night of drinking and storytelling. Dennis decided to turn in early. "I'll catch you guys in the morning," he said, heading into the RV. Paul and I stayed up for a while longer, but eventually we decided to call it a night too. I was just about to head inside when I heard a noise. It was a faint, almost imperceptible whispering. I turned to Paul. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" he asked, looking around. "That whispering," I said, straining to listen. Paul shook his head. "You're hearing things, man. Let's get some sleep." We went inside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the night. Just as I was about to drift off, I heard it again, whispering clearer this time. I sat up, heart racing. "Paul, do you hear that?" Paul grunted, half asleep. "Hear what the whispering?" I said. My voice shaking, Paul sat up listening. Then we both heard it, a low, guttural voice speaking in a language neither of us understood. We looked at each other, eyes wide with fear. "Dennis!" Paul shouted, jumping out of his bunk. We ran to Dennis's bunk, but he was gone. His things were there, but there was no sign of him. We searched the RV, calling his name, but there was no response. "We need to find him," I said, grabbing a flashlight. We ran outside, shouting for Dennis, but the forest was silent. We split up, searching the area around the campsite. I was about to give up when I heard Paul scream. I ran towards the sound, flashlight beam bouncing wildly. I found Paul standing over something, his face pale. He pointed with a shaking hand. On the ground was a trail of blood leading into the trees. "We need to call for help," I said, pulling out my phone, but there was no signal. We followed the blood trail, our fear mounting with each step. The whispering grew louder, more insistent. It seemed to be all around us, coming from the trees themselves. Finally, we came to a clearing, and what we saw froze us in our tracks. Dennis was there, or what was left of him. His body was torn apart, scattered across the clearing. Standing over him was a creature unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was tall and gaunt, with long, spindly limbs and a face twisted into a grotesque snarl. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and it seemed to be watching us, waiting. Paul and I backed away slowly, but the creature stepped forward, blocking our path. "Run!" I shouted, shoving Paul towards the trees. We ran blindly through the forest, the creature close behind. The whispering grew louder, more frenzied. I could hear Paul's heavy breathing, his footsteps pounding the ground beside me. We burst into the clearing where our RV was parked, and I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking. And I slammed the door shut behind us. The creature slammed into the side of the RV, rocking it violently. I started the engine, flooring the gas pedal. The RV lurched forward, and I drove like a madman, tearing down the narrow dirt road. We didn't stop until we reached the nearest town. We stumbled into the local sheriff's office, babbling about what had happened. The sheriff, a grizzled old man named Tom, looked skeptical, but agreed to send a deputy to the campsite. We waited anxiously as the hours passed. Finally, the deputy returned looking pale and shaken. There was nothing there, he said. No blood, no body, nothing. Paul and I looked at each other stunned. But we saw it, I insisted. We saw Dennis in that thing. The deputy shook his head. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you boys had too much to drink. We left the sheriff's office in a daze, not knowing what to believe. Dennis was gone, and there was no trace of him. We returned home, our trip cut short. Paul and I didn't talk much after that. We tried to move on, but the memory of that night haunted us. A few months later, I was doing some research, trying to make sense of what had happened. I came across a local legend, a creature known as the Nalek. According to the stories, the Nalek was a malevolent spirit that hunted those who ventured too deep into the forest. It was said to whisper to its victims, driving them mad before it struck. I don't know if what we saw was the Nalek, but I do know that something terrible happened in those woods, something I can't explain. And every now and then, when I'm alone at night, I hear the whispering, faint but unmistakable, and I wonder if it's still out there waiting. My name is Jose Rodriguez, and I am 34 years old, and this happened to me in 1983. I had just moved to a small town in Wyoming, looking for a fresh start after my divorce. I was a freelance photographer, scraping by on gigs and living in a small cabin on the outskirts of town. Life was slow, and that's how I liked it. It was peaceful, with the mountains looming in the distance, and the quiet serenity of the woods surrounding me. The town itself was quaint, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else. The locals were friendly enough, though I always felt like an outsider. I made friends with a few people, including my neighbor, Reuben Harker. Reuben was an old-timer born and raised in the town. He had stories about everything, and I enjoyed listening to him talk about the history of the place. One evening, Reuben and I were sitting on my porch, drinking beers and watching the sun set over the mountains. The conversation turned to local legends, and Reuben started talking about the strange disappearances that had happened over the years. "Gideon, you ever hear about the folks that went missing around these parts?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "Can't say I have, Reuben," I replied, taking a swig of my beer. "What happened to them?" "Well, it's a bit of a mystery. Every few years someone just up and vanishes. No trace, no clues, nothing. The locals say it's the work of the werewolf," Reuben said, his voice dropping to a whisper as if the creature might be listening. I chuckled. "Come on, Reuben, you expect me to believe that?" Reuben shrugged. "Believe what you want, but folks around here take it seriously. They say it's been happening for decades. My granddad even claimed to have seen it once. A hulking beast with glowing eyes and fangs like knives. Sounds like a campfire story to me," I said, trying to mask my unease with humor. "But it's a good one, I'll give you that." Reuben gave me a long look. "Just be careful, Gideon. This place has secrets, and some of them are better left alone." I laughed it off, but that night I couldn't shake the feeling that Reuben's words held a kernel of truth. I chalked it up to an overactive imagination and went to bed, trying to put the thought of werewolves out of my mind. A few weeks later, I had a photography gig in a nearby town. I spent the day shooting and decided to take the long way home, hoping to catch some good shots of the landscape at dusk. The light was perfect, casting an ethereal glow over the rolling hills and dense forests. As I drove through a particularly remote stretch of road, my car started to sputter. Before I knew it, it had died completely, leaving me stranded in the middle of nowhere. Cursing my luck, I got out and popped the hood, but I didn't know the first thing about fixing cars. I was about to start walking when I heard something rustling in the woods nearby. I glanced around, suddenly aware of how isolated I was. The sun was dipping below the horizon, and shadows were creeping across the landscape. Hoping it was just a deer or some other harmless animal, there was no response, but the rustling continued, getting closer. My heart started to race as I realized that whatever it was heading straight for me. I backed away from the car, my eyes scanning the tree line, and then I saw it. At first it was just a shadow, a dark shape moving between the trees. But as it emerged into the fading light, I got a good look at it. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall with long, shaggy fur and eyes that seemed to glow with an unnatural light. Its face was a twisted snarl of fangs and claws, more beast than man. I stood there, frozen in terror, as it started to move towards me. In a flash of instinct, I turned and ran, sprinting down the road as fast as I could. I could hear the creature behind me, its heavy footsteps pounding against the ground. I didn't dare look back, fear driving me forward. I stumbled upon a small cabin, its windows dark and shuttered. Without thinking, I ran to the door and pounded on it, hoping against hope that someone was home. The door creaked open and an elderly woman peeked out. "Please, you have to let me in." I gasped. "There's something out there." The woman's eyes widened in fear, and she pulled me inside, slamming the door shut behind me. "What did you see?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A creature," I stammered. "A werewolf." The woman's face went pale. "It's come back," she whispered. "We thought it was gone for good." "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to catch my breath. "The werewolf. It's been hunting these woods for years. My husband went out one night to check on the livestock and never came back. I saw it myself once, a long time ago. It's real, and it's dangerous." I looked around the cabin, noting the heavy wooden shutters and reinforced door. "You've been preparing for this, haven't you?" The woman nodded. "We've all heard the stories, but most folks don't believe them. I've always been ready, just in case." We sat in silence, the weight of the situation sinking in. Outside, the night was eerily quiet. I could feel the tension in the air, a palpable sense of dread. Then, without warning, there was a loud crash. The door shook as something massive slammed against it. The woman grabbed a shotgun from the corner and handed it to me. "Take this," she said. "You're going to need it." I took the gun, my hands trembling. "What about you?" "I've got another one," she said, brandishing a rifle. "We'll make our stand here." The creature continued to batter the door, and I could see the wood starting to splinter. I braced myself, knowing that we didn't have much time. Finally, the door gave way, and the werewolf burst into the cabin. It was even more terrifying up close, its eyes blazing with a feral intensity. The woman fired first, the shot echoing through the cabin. The creature staggered but didn't go down. I aimed the shotgun and fired, the recoil nearly knocking me off my feet. The werewolf roared in pain, but it kept coming, its eyes fixed on me. I fired again and again, each shot chipping away at the monster's resolve. The woman kept shooting, her face set in grim determination. Together we drove the creature back, each shot weakening it further. Finally, with one last desperate lunge, it collapsed to the floor, its body twitching as it took its final breaths. We stood there, panting and exhausted, the cabin filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder. The woman lowered her rifle and looked at me. "It's over," she said, her voice trembling. "We did it." I nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. The creature was dead, but the memory of that night would stay with me forever. In the aftermath, the town was abuzz with the news of the werewolf's death. People were skeptical at first, but the evidence was undeniable. The creature's body was taken away by authorities, and the disappearances stopped. Life slowly returned to normal, but I could never shake the feeling that something dark still lingered in those woods. I moved away a few months later, needing to put as much distance between myself and that place as possible. I still think about it sometimes, the terror and the adrenaline of that night. I've told my story to a few people, but most of them just laugh it off as a tall tale. But I know what I saw and I know what we did. The woman, whose name I later learned was Edith, became a bit of a local legend herself. She stayed in that cabin, always prepared, always vigilant. We kept in touch for a while, sharing a bond forged in the heat of battle. And as for me, I kept on with my photography, always with an eye on the shadows, always wary of what might be lurking just out of sight. Because once you've faced a monster, you never forget, and you never stop looking over your shoulder. So that's my story. Believe it or don't, it makes no difference to me. But if you ever find yourself in a small town with a history of disappearances, keep your wits about you. You never know what might be waiting in the dark. It was in '77 I decided to take that big cross-country road trip. You know, the whole find-yourself thing, me, my trusty RV, and an open highway. Figured I'd always loved the mountains, and what better place than the Appalachians for some stunning views. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, though. Those winding roads, the way the woods close in on you, it can get eerie fast, particularly when you're on your own. Found this old pull-off one day, figured it'd be a good spot to camp for the night. It looked abandoned, overgrown with weeds and a cracked asphalt path that led into the trees. Seemed peaceful enough at first, but the more I settled in, the more I got that feeling. The hairs on the back of your neck standing on end. Not scared exactly, just unsettled. There were carvings all over it. You know the stuff kids leave behind. Lovers' initials, sloppy doodles. Except one carving caught my eye, crudely etched, the words, "Watch out." A chill ran through me. I shrugged it off, told myself it was probably some local jerk trying to creep people out. Night fell, heavy and dark. I made a campfire, trying to push the unsettling feeling out of my mind. That's when I heard it, a rustling from the tree line, like something large was moving through the brush. Figured it was probably a deer, but it kept getting closer, those unseen eyes on me. Then silence. "Anyone out there?" I called out, my voice sounding too small in the vastness of the woods. No response. I tossed another log on the fire, the crackle breaking through the oppressive quiet. My nerves were buzzing, but I just chalked it up to being alone in the dark. I mean, woods are full of weird noises, right? Suddenly a flicker of motion at the edge of the firelight. A human figure emerged. My heart jumped. An older man, probably late 50s, raggedy clothes. He was average height, stocky build, but it was his eyes that sent a wave of unease rolling over me. They were cold, empty. I tried to speak, but my mouth formed no words. The man just stood there staring at me with those dead eyes. I could feel sweat breaking out on my forehead. Then he moved. Not a lunge, more of a slow, steady walk towards the RV. I finally found my voice. "What do you want?" I yelled, trying to sound brave, but mostly just freaking out. He held up a finger to his lips, motioning for silence. My mind raced. Was that a threat? Did he have a weapon? Did he have backup? I scanned the shadows behind him, expecting more figures to emerge, but he was alone. He gestured towards the RV, then pointed back at the picnic table, drawing a finger across his neck in a slow, chilling motion. Then he simply turned and walked back into the woods, disappearing as silently as he'd appeared. I blinked, my pulse pounding in my ears. Had that just happened? I barely slept a wink that night. I kept telling myself I must have imagined the threat, that the whole thing was just my nerves. The next morning I packed up fast, trying to leave that creepy place behind. As I pulled out, I glanced back at the picnic table. Right there, freshly carved over the old warning, was a new one. My name, Jeremy. I hit the gas, gravel flying. Didn't stop until I crossed 2 state lines. I still don't know who that man was. Some backwoods hermit, a serial killer in the making. Whatever it was, that experience soured me on solo camping for good. Even now, sometimes I hear a rustling in the leaves, a footstep, and I think of that night. I see his face, those eyes, and the carving on the table. My name is Juan Diaz, and I am 32 years old. And this happened to me a few years back when I was living in the small town of Harrisville, tucked away in the Appalachian mountains. Now, Harrisville was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, or at least thought they did. I was working as a mechanic in my uncle's garage, trying to save up enough money to finally move out of his basement. Life was simple and quiet, which suited me just fine. One late summer evening, I was closing up the garage when my buddy, Len Whitaker, strolled in. He had that wild look in his eyes that usually meant trouble or, at the very least, a very bad idea. "Wayland, you gotta come with me," Len said, barely able to contain his excitement. "You won't believe what I found up in the old Harper place," I groaned inwardly. The Harper place was an old, abandoned farmhouse about 10 miles out of town. Everyone said it was haunted, but I figured it was just a place for kids to scare each other. Still, Len was my best friend, and I'd never been able to resist his enthusiasm. "All right, Len," I sighed. "What crazy thing did you find this time?" He grinned, his eyes shining. "Just come and see, man. Trust me." We drove out there in Len's rusty pickup, the kind that rattled and groaned like it might fall apart at any moment. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the mountains, and by the time we got to the Harper place, it was nearly dark. The house loomed in front of us, a hulking silhouette against the twilight. The windows were broken, and the paint was peeling off in large chunks. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Len led the way, flashlight in hand, and I followed reluctantly. Inside, the house smelled of damp wood and decay. The floorboards creaked under our weight, and the wind howled through the broken windows, giving the place an eerie, almost alive feeling. We made our way to the basement, where Len claimed to have found something incredible. As we descended the rickety stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I laughed it off, blaming it on the atmosphere, but that didn't make it any easier. At the bottom of the stairs, Len pointed to a corner of the basement where the floorboards had been pulled up, revealing a dark hole. Think it might be some kind of old cellar. I peered into the hole, shining my flashlight down. It looked like a small, dark room. Curiosity got the better of me, and I climbed down, Len following close behind. The air was musty and thick, and the light from our flashlights barely penetrated the darkness. We stumbled around, finding old jars of preserved fruits and vegetables, long since gone bad. "Pretty creepy, huh?" Len said, his voice echoing in the confined space. "Yeah, no kidding," I replied, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. We were about to head back up when Len stumbled over something. He cursed and pointed his flashlight at the ground, revealing what looked like a small wooden chest. "No way," Len whispered, dropping to his knees and brushing the dirt off the chest. "Think it's treasure?" "Only one way to find out," I said, my curiosity piqued. Len pried the chest open, and inside we found a collection of old papers and photographs. As we sifted through them, it became clear that they were the belongings of the Harper family. There were birth certificates, letters, and old black and white photos. One photo in particular caught my eye. A family portrait of the Harpers, standing in front of their house looking grim and serious, except for one figure off to the side, barely visible, a tall man with dark, piercing eyes. "Who do you think that is?" Len asked, pointing to the man in the photo. "No idea," I said, "but he gives me the creeps." We packed up the chest and headed back up the stairs. As we emerged into the basement, we both heard it, a low guttural sound, like an animal growling. My blood ran cold, and I looked at Len, who was as white as a sheet. "You heard that right?" I whispered. "Yeah," Len replied, his voice shaky. "Let's get out of here." We ran up the stairs and out of the house, not stopping until we were back in Len's truck, breathing hard and hearts pounding. "What the hell was that?" I asked, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "No idea," Len said, "but I don't think we should come back here." I nodded in agreement. We drove back to town in silence, the weight of what we'd found hanging heavy in the air. We decided to keep the chest at my place for now, not wanting to deal with the questions it might raise. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the man in the photo, the growl, and the uneasy feeling that something was terribly wrong. Around midnight, I heard a noise coming from the basement. My heart skipped a beat, and I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a baseball bat. I made my way downstairs, the house creaking with every step. The noise was getting louder, a sort of scratching sound like nails on wood. I reached the basement door, took a deep breath, and flung it open. Nothing. The basement was empty, the chest sitting exactly where we had left it. I let out a sigh of relief, feeling a bit foolish for getting so worked up. I turned to go back upstairs, and that's when I saw it, a pair of glowing eyes staring at me from the darkness. I froze, my mind racing. The eyes didn't move, just stared at me, unblinking. I backed up slowly, never taking my eyes off them, and bolted the basement door shut. I didn't sleep at all that night, too scared to close my eyes. The next morning I called Len and told him what happened. He came over, and we both went back down to the basement, armed with flashlights and the bat. "See anything?" Len asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "No, but I swear I saw something last night," I said, my nerves still on edge. We searched the basement from top to bottom, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had disturbed something that didn't want to be found. Over the next few days, strange things started happening around town. People went missing. First it was old Mr. Delaney, then a couple of hikers who had come through the area. The town was in a panic, everyone on edge and looking for answers. One evening, Len and I were sitting on my porch, trying to make sense of it all. That's when we saw it, a figure, tall and shadowy, moving through the trees at the edge of my property. We grabbed our flashlights and the bat and headed out to investigate. As we got closer, we could make out more details. It was a man, but not quite. He was tall, with long matted hair and eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. His clothes were tattered, and his skin was pale and sickly. He moved with an unnatural grace, almost gliding through the forest. "Who are you?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. The figure stopped and turned to look at us, his eyes piercing through the darkness. He didn't say a word, just stared at us with a look that sent chills down my spine. Len and I backed up slowly, not taking our eyes off the figure. As we retreated, the figure turned and disappeared into the trees. We ran back to the house, locking the door behind us. "What the hell was that?" Len asked, his face pale. "I don't know," I said, "but I think it's connected to the Harper place." We decided to go back to the Harper place one last time to see if we could find any answers. Armed with flashlights and the bat, we made our way back to the old farmhouse. As we approached, the house seemed even more menacing than before. We made our way to the basement, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The hole was still there, the chest gone. We climbed down, searching for any clue that might explain what was happening. In the corner of the room, we found a set of old iron shackles attached to the wall. They were covered in rust, but it was clear they had been used recently. My heart sank as I realized what this meant. Someone or something had been kept down here. As we examined the shackles, we heard a noise from above. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving across the floorboards. We froze, our flashlights flickering. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. No answer. The footsteps continued, growing louder. We scrambled up the ladder, our hearts pounding. As we reached the top, we saw him, the man from the forest, standing in the doorway, blocking our escape. He lunged at us, his eyes wild and his teeth bared. We fought back with everything we had. But he was incredibly strong. He knocked Len to the ground, and I swung the bat with all my might, hitting him square in the head. The man staggered, blood pouring from the wound, but he didn't go down. He turned to me, his eyes filled with rage, and grabbed the bat from my hands, snapping it in half like a twig. I backed up, tripping over the broken floorboards, barely conscious. The man advanced on me, and I knew I was out of options. Desperate, I grabbed a shard of broken glass and plunged it into his chest. He let out a roar of pain, staggering back. I grabbed Len and we made a run for it, bursting out of the house and into the night. We didn't stop running until we reached the truck, our breaths coming in. We drove back to town in silence, too scared to speak. When we got back, we went straight to the sheriff's office, telling him everything that had happened. He listened, his face growing grimmer with each word. The next day, a search party was sent to the Harper place. They found the basement, the shackles, and the blood, but no sign of the man. The sheriff ordered the house to be boarded up and warned everyone to stay away. In the weeks that followed, the missing people were never found. The town slowly returned to normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Len and I never spoke of it again, but we both knew that whatever we had disturbed was still out there, watching. Years have passed since that night, and I've moved away from Harrisville, trying to put it all behind me. I see something out of the corner of my eye, a tall, shadowy figure with glowing eyes, and I remember that some things are better left undisturbed. My name is Carlos Vega, and I am 34 years old, and this happened to me on October 16, 2011. I'd always been a big fan of camping, getting away from the chaos of city life and immersing myself in the quiet solitude of nature. That weekend, my friend Owen and I decided to head out to the Black Hills in South Dakota. We packed up my RV with enough supplies for a few days, including plenty of beer, some fishing gear, and enough junk food to last us a week. Owen and I had been friends since college, bonding over our love for the outdoors and our mutual disdain for cubicle life. We both worked in finance, a job that paid well but sucked the soul right out of you. So these trips were our lifeline, a way to recharge and feel human again. This time we were aiming for a spot we'd heard about from a guy at the bar, deep in the hills, off the beaten path, and supposedly untouched by tourists. We rolled into the site just before sunset. It was perfect, an open clearing surrounded by dense forest, with a clear stream running nearby. We parked the RV, set up camp, and cracked open a couple of beers. The first night was uneventful, just the way we liked it. We sat by the fire, talked about nothing in particular, and enjoyed the stars. The next morning we decided to explore the area. We found a small trail that led deeper into the forest and followed it for a couple of miles until we came across an old abandoned cabin. It looked like it had been there for decades, maybe longer. The wood was rotting, the windows were broken, and the door hung off its hinges. Naturally, Owen and I were curious, so we decided to take a look inside. The cabin was empty except for a few pieces of broken furniture and a lot of dust. There were no signs that anyone had been there in years, so we didn't think much of it. We left and spent the rest of the day hiking, fishing, and generally enjoying the peace and quiet. That evening, back at the campsite, things started to get strange. It was just after dinner, and we were sitting by the fire again, when we heard a noise coming from the woods. At first we thought it was just an animal, maybe a deer or a raccoon, but the sounds didn't fit. It was more like a scratching, followed by a low, almost guttural sound that I can't quite describe. Owen grabbed a flashlight and shone it towards the noise. We didn't see anything, but the scratching continued, getting louder and closer. We both stood up, feeling a mix of curiosity and unease. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. We looked at each other, shrugged it off, and went back to our beers, chalking it up to the woods playing tricks on us. That night I had trouble sleeping. I kept hearing noises, branches snapping, leaves rustling, but every time I looked out the window, there was nothing there. At some point I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, it was morning. Owen and I decided to take it easy that day. We stayed close to the campsite, fishing in the stream, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I didn't say anything to Owen, not wanting to sound paranoid, but I could tell he felt it too. He kept glancing into the woods, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced by a tense alertness. That evening, as we were cooking dinner, we heard the noise again. This time it was louder and more insistent. Owen grabbed his flashlight and a hunting knife we kept for emergencies. We moved slowly towards the edge of the clearing, the fire casting long shadows behind us. "Who's there?" Owen called out, his voice steady but with an edge of tension. There was no response, just the continued scratching and rustling. We took a few more steps, and then we saw it. Or rather, we saw the outline of it. Something large, hunched over, with limbs that looked too long for its body. It was just standing there, half hidden by the trees, watching us. "What the hell is that?" I whispered, more to myself than to Owen. "I don't know," he replied, gripping the knife tighter. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, neither of us daring to move. Then, in a flash, the thing was gone, disappearing into the darkness of the forest. We backed up slowly, not taking our eyes off the spot where it had stood, and made our way back to the fire. "Maybe we should leave," I suggested, my voice shaky. Owen shook his head. "No, not yet. Let's see what happens. It could just be some animal," but I could see the doubt in his eyes. We finished dinner in silence, the crackling of the fire the only sound. We decided to take turns keeping watch that night, just in case. Owen took the first shift while I tried to get some sleep. I don't know how long I slept, but I woke up to Owen shaking me, his face pale. "It's back," he whispered, "and it's closer." I grabbed the flashlight and knife and followed him outside. The noise was louder now, more aggressive. We shone the light towards the sound and saw the creature again, closer this time, its eyes reflecting the light in an eerie glow. It moved slowly towards us, almost as if it was testing us. "Get in the RV," I said, my voice barely a whisper. We backed up slowly, keeping the light on the creature. It followed us, never breaking eye contact. We scrambled into the RV, slamming the door shut and locking it. The creature came right up to the door, scratching at it with long, sharp claws. We could hear its breathing, heavy and ragged, as it tried to get inside. "Start the engine," Owen said, his voice tight with fear. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. The engine roared to life and I floored it, not caring where we were going as long as it was away from that thing. The RV lurched forward, and we sped down the narrow dirt road, the creature's silhouette disappearing in the rearview mirror. We drove for what felt like hours until we reached a small town. We pulled into a gas station and parked, both of us too shaken to speak. We sat there in silence for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. "Do you think it followed us?" Owen finally asked, breaking the silence. "I don't know," I replied, my voice hoarse, "but I don't want to find out." We decided to call it quits on the camping trip and headed back home. The drive was long and tense, both of us constantly checking the mirrors, half expecting to see that thing following us. But we made it back without incident. And after a few days, the fear started to fade, replaced by a nagging sense of curiosity. What was that thing? Where did it come from? We never found out. We did some research looking up local legends and folklore, but nothing matched what we saw. The closest we came was a story about a creature called Vrikalas, an ancient mythical beast that was said to haunt the forests. But that was just a story, right? Owen and I haven't been camping since. We still talk about that trip sometimes, trying to make sense of it, but we always come up short. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. All I know is that something is out there, something that defies explanation, and it's better to leave it alone. So, if you ever find yourself in the Black Hills, remember this story. Stay on the beaten path. Don't go exploring old cabins. And if you hear strange noises in the night, get the hell out of there. You never know what might be watching you. Whispering Pines, Wyoming, 1961. The wind howled through the pines, a mournful sound that matched the ache in my gut. I'd come to this godforsaken corner of Wyoming to fish. Not for trout, mind you. Those were for tourists and city folk with fancy rods and even fancier vests. I was after something with teeth, something that fought back. Catfish, maybe? Or a muskie if I was lucky. But the fish weren't biting, not that day. The river ran high and murky, swollen with spring snowmelt. It was the kind of water that made a man feel small, insignificant, like a bug on a windshield, just waiting to be splattered. So I did what any sensible angler would do. I cracked open a beer and settled back against a boulder, letting the sun warm my face. The woods were quiet, save for the chirping of birds and the occasional rustle of leaves. It was the kind of silence that made you strain your ears, listening for something you couldn't quite hear. That's when I saw it. A flicker of movement in the underbrush, like a shadow slipping between the trees. At first I thought it was a deer, but it moved differently, with a low, slinking gait that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I reached for my rifle, a lever-action Winchester I'd inherited from my old man. It was a beauty, with a walnut stock worn smooth from years of use. I'd taken down my fair share of game with that rifle, but nothing like what I saw that day. It stepped out of the shadows, and I nearly choked on my beer. It was a wolf, but not like any I'd ever seen. It stood on two legs, tall as a man, with muscles rippling beneath its fur. Its eyes were yellow, burning with a feral intelligence that made my blood run cold. I raised the rifle, my finger tightening on the trigger. But I hesitated. There was something about the creature that gave me pause, a primal fear that went beyond the instinct to hunt. It stared at me for a long moment, its gaze unwavering. Then it turned and vanished back into the woods, leaving me shaking and breathless. I didn't fish that day. Instead, I packed up my gear and headed back to town, my mind racing with questions. What was that thing? Where did it come from? And why had it spared me? I didn't get any answers that day, or the next, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to see. Something dangerous. The following morning, I woke to the news of a missing hiker, a young woman out for a day hike in the woods. They found her backpack torn to shreds, but no sign of her body. I knew then, in my gut, that the wolf creature was responsible, and I knew I couldn't let it go unpunished. I spent the next few days scouring the woods, following tracks, searching for any sign of the creature. But it was like chasing a ghost. It left no trace, no scent. It was as if it didn't exist, but I knew better. One night, as I sat by the fire, nursing a whiskey, I heard a noise outside my cabin. A low growl, like a dog's, but deeper, more menacing. I grabbed my rifle and crept to the window. The moon was full, casting a silvery light on the clearing in front of my cabin, and there, standing in the moonlight, was the wolf creature. It was bigger than I remembered, its fur matted with blood. Its eyes glowed in the darkness, filled with a hunger that made me sick to my stomach. I raised the rifle, my hands steady now. This time, I wouldn't hesitate. I fired, the shot echoing through the night. The creature howled in pain, but it didn't go down. Instead, it lunged at the window, its claws raking against the glass. I fired again and again, the cabin filling with smoke and the smell of gunpowder. The creature staggered back, its fur stained crimson, but it didn't stop. It kept coming, its eyes fixed on me. I ran out of bullets. I dropped the rifle and grabbed a knife from the table. It was the last resort, a desperate act. The creature smashed through the window, sending shards of glass flying. I braced myself, the knife held high. It leaped at me, its jaws open wide. I thrust the knife upwards into its chest. It let out a blood-curdling scream and fell to the floor, its body convulsing. I stood over it, panting, the knife still clutched in my hand. The creature's eyes dimmed, its life fading away. I didn't feel any triumph, only a profound sadness. I had killed the creature I didn't understand, a creature that was both beautiful and terrifying. In the aftermath, the authorities found the remains of the missing hiker. The wolf creature had killed her, but not eaten her. It was as if it had killed for the sake of killing. They never found the creature's body. It vanished, just like it had appeared. Some said it was a bear, others a mountain lion. But I knew the truth. I knew that the woods held secrets darker than any man could imagine. And I knew that I would never forget the night I faced the wolf creature. It was a night that changed me forever, a night that taught me the true meaning of fear. Some say the creature was a manifestation of the wilderness itself, a guardian of the wild places. Others say it was a demon, a creature of pure evil. I don't know what it was, but I know that it was real, and I know that it's still out there, somewhere in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. I was on a month-long RV trip through the Northwest. My name's Ezekiel, by the way. Just me, the wide-open road, and the comforting rumble of that big diesel engine beneath my feet. It was my kind of peace, especially after the mess of a divorce I'd just been through. This particular evening found me parked on the edge of the Malhir National Forest in Oregon. It was a remote spot, the kind I prefer, not a designated campsite, just a wide dirt pull-off along the highway. Sun was dipping below the tree line, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange. It was downright beautiful. I stepped out of the RV, beer in hand, and breathed in the crisp mountain air. That's when I heard it, the faint sound of snapping twigs off in the woods. I shrugged it off at first. Could be anything, right? Plenty of critters roamed these parts. But then I heard it again, a bit closer this time. Suddenly, I wasn't so relaxed. I scanned the darkening tree line, heart quickening in my chest. Nothing. I told myself to chill out. It was probably just my post-divorce nerves running a little high. Still, something felt off. I took a cautious step back toward the RV, keeping my eyes peeled for any sign of movement. That's when I saw the first flicker of light through the trees. Firelight. My gut clenched. There shouldn't have been anyone else out here, let alone a damn campfire this close to the road. My mind raced. Was it just some fellow camper? Could be. But something didn't add up. Why not set up camp closer to the pull-off? Why be tucked away in the woods? A shiver ran down my spine. I darted back inside the RV, locking the door behind me. Peering out the window, I watched the flickering light. It was still there, and it seemed to be getting closer. I fumbled for my phone. No signal. Of course not. My stomach dropped. Then I remembered the handgun I kept under the driver's seat, a relic from my ex-wife's gun nut days, but I was starting to be grateful for her paranoia. My shaking hands loaded the gun. I crept to the driver's seat and risked a peek out the front window. Moonlight cut through the trees, and I swear I saw a figure standing near the firelight. Just a tall, dark shape, but human. Definitely human. My heart pounded against my ribs. Who the hell was out there? And why were they stealthily moving towards my RV? I gripped the gun tighter, adrenaline rushing through me like icy water. The figure disappeared back into the darkness. I waited, frozen, listening for any sound. Nothing. Then a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence. It was a woman's voice, filled with terror, cut off abruptly. My mind raced through horrifying scenarios. Was the figure attacking her? What if he was coming for me next? I had to do something. I couldn't just cower here. But could I even bring myself to fire a gun? My hand shook on the weapon, my vision blurred with conflicting waves of fear and desperation. A low thud echoed from outside, something hitting the side of the RV. Then another thud, harder this time. My stomach lurched. He was here. I heard a scraping noise, metal on metal. The figure was at the door handle, trying to force it open. A growl rumbled from outside. Not an animal growl, a low, guttural human snarl. Terror propelled me into action. I lurched to the front, gun raised, and yanked the blinds open. Moonlight washed over the figure, momentarily freezing him outside the driver's side window. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. A tall man, wiry and filthy, a tangled mess of hair covering most of his face. But what stuck with me were his eyes, wild, filled with a crazed intensity I couldn't fathom. He stared at me, teeth bared in a snarl, and raised a bloodied axe high in the air. He swung that axe down in a vicious arc, shattering the driver's window. Glass exploded inward, peppering my face. I screamed and flinched back, dropping the gun to the floor. I had to get out of here. The filthy man's face twisted into a grotesque smile, one hand reaching into the broken window, fumbling for the door latch. On instinct, I scrambled across the seat, throwing myself at the passenger door. With a curse, I ripped it open, tumbling out onto the dirt road. I was up and running before my brain fully registered what I was doing, adrenaline pushing me into blind flight. The man roared in frustration, stumbling out of the RV after me. The woods were pitch black, the towering trees like monstrous claws reaching out in the night. My breath burned in my lungs, my legs pumped, fear propelling me forward. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't stop. He was gaining on me. I could hear his rasping breath and the thud of his footsteps closing in. Panic fueled me. I couldn't let him catch me. Couldn't let him take me like he did that woman. A sob tore from my throat. Why did I have to run into this sicko on my trip? What the hell was he even doing out here? A root snagged my foot and I went sprawling to the ground, a cry escaping me as I braced for impact. The forest floor was cold and damp against my skin, the smell of pine needles sharp in my nostrils. I rolled onto my back, expecting to see the madman towering over me, axe raised. Nothing. Just the faint outline of tree branches against the dimly lit sky. Had I lost him? Before I could get my bearings and push myself up, a hand clamped over my mouth, stifling my scream. Another shadowed figure, this one smelling of stale sweat and something metallic like blood. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Was I done for? I struggled uselessly. His grip was like iron. Rough fabric was shoved against my nose, and then a sickly sweet scent invaded my nostrils. Chloroform. My mind screamed in protest, the world swirling dizzily as my thrashing movement slowed. My eyes fluttered, blackness encroaching from all sides. When I opened my eyes, the world was tilting and throbbing. Pain pulsed through my skull as I tried to sit up, only to find my wrists and ankles bound to a rough wooden chair. My muddled brain tried to make sense of my surroundings. I was in what looked like a crudely built shack or maybe a large shed. Flickering lamplight cast long, grotesque shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something else, something foul that made my stomach churn. He was sitting across from me, the madman. He'd cleaned up somewhat, his face visible now. Just an ordinary-looking guy, late 30s maybe, with lank brown hair and a scraggly beard. But those eyes, they still held that same wildness that made my skin crawl. "What do you want?" My voice cracked, barely a whisper. He smiled, a twisted, unsettling thing. "Well now, Zeke," he rasped. "That's the thing, isn't it?" My mind raced. How did he know my name? I need to get back. I choked out, my gaze sweeping the room, looking for an escape route, some way out of this nightmare. The man stood moving slowly, tauntingly close. He plucked a blood-stained knife from a nearby table. My heart hammered against my ribs as he circled me like a predator. "I can't let you go," he said, his voice low and raspy. "You saw my face, no witnesses." I squeezed my eyes shut, my body trembling. This was it. A loud crack echoed through the shack like a gunshot. The madman shrieked, his knife clattering to the floor. He staggered, gripping a bloodied wound on his shoulder. In the dim light, I saw another figure standing in the doorway, a figure holding a rifle. "Took you long enough," I choked out, a hysterical laugh bubbling from my throat. Relief flooded through me, but it was quickly replaced by a deep, unsettling dread. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I looked at the man across from me, the madman, and an icy chill crept over me. Even with pain twisting his features, his eyes never left me, filled with that same crazed intensity, with a silent promise. This was far from over. "Come on, old man, let's get you out of here," the stranger with the rifle said in a gruff but surprisingly gentle voice. He was a towering figure dressed in worn camouflage gear, face half hidden behind a salt and pepper beard. As my rescuer cut the ropes binding my ankles, I found my voice again. "The woman," I rasped. There was a woman out there. He attacked her." The stranger nodded, his face grim. "I heard, don't worry, help's on the way. Got a signal out on my shortwave radio. Sheriff should be here any time now." A wave of relief washed over me, then a fresh rush of adrenaline. "He has a partner," I said urgently. "The one who knocked me out, you need to find him too." The stranger helped me to my feet. My legs were like jelly, numb and tingling after being bound for so long. He gave me a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "We'll lock them both up, don't you worry. Got a place you can stay for now? My cabin's not fancy, but it's warm." He seemed like the kind of guy who lived alone in the forest for a reason, but right now he was my only hope. I nodded gratefully. "My RV's still back at the pull-off," I said. But I shuddered at the thought of going back there alone. If they really did catch the madman and his partner, it would be a nightmare to retrieve my vehicle and all my belongings from the crime scene. We were moving now, deeper into the woods, away from the shack and its horrors. A faint glow appeared through the trees ahead, his cabin no doubt. As we got closer, the smell of wood smoke and something like roasting meat drifted towards us. My stomach growled, and I realized I hadn't eaten in hours. "That smells amazing," I ventured, my voice still raspy but stronger than before. He chuckled, a surprisingly warm sound. "Venison stew. Hope you like it. You'll need something hearty after what those bastards put you through." His words sent shivers down my spine. I risked a sideways glance at him. His expression was unreadable, buried beneath that bushy beard. What was this guy's story anyway? Living out here all alone, happening upon my little crime scene so conveniently. We reached a small clearing, a modest log cabin nestled against the tree line. Smoke curled from the chimney and warm light spilled from the windows. For a moment it looked like the most inviting place in the world. Maybe a bit of normalcy was exactly what I needed after tonight's horrors. And then, like a whiplash, a memory struck me. The second figure, the one who used chloroform on me. Before I could react, the old man was behind me, his calloused hand again clamping down over my mouth. Panic surged through me, but there was a sharp, stinging pinch in my neck and my vision blurred. As I fell into darkness, it hit me like a ton of bricks. This was no rescue, this was a trap. The old man wasn't a savior, he was the third accomplice. And as the world spun away into blackness, I couldn't shake the chilling thought that they clearly weren't done with me yet. My eyes fluttered open, my head pounding like a bass drum. I was on the floor of the dimly lit cabin, my hands and feet bound once again, this time with what felt like barbed wire. I jerked violently, but it was no use. The wire cut into my skin. Through a fog of pain and confusion, I tried to take in my surroundings. This wasn't the same room I'd been in with the madman. Rough-hewn walls, tools hanging haphazardly, the distinct smell of animal hides and grease. Was this a hunting cabin? Footsteps echoed from somewhere down a short hallway. My blood ran cold as the madman emerged from the shadows. That same cruel grin on his face. He crouched down in front of me, tilting his head to the side. "Guess you learned the hard way why it's not so smart to go snooping around where you're not welcome, huh, Zeke?" His voice was a mocking sing-song. My voice quivered when I spoke. "What's going on? Why?" He laughed, and the sound was like nails on a chalkboard. "You really think we're just going to let you walk out of here after seeing our pretty faces?" He leaned close, his eyes locking with mine. "You might have slowed us down, Zeke, but it ain't going to end well for you, I promise." A wave of despair crashed over me so close. I had been so close to getting away. I thought for a wild moment about yelling, struggling, just to make some noise, anything to grab the attention of that grizzled old man with the rifle. But the madman's eyes glittered with a sadistic promise. He'd enjoy hurting me for my defiance. My body still burned with residual adrenaline and the ache where he'd injected me. He must have used some sort of tranquilizer, enough to keep me down but aware. The madman stood, stretching lazily. Well, that was fun. Wasn't it, Zeke? Now to business. Me and the boys, we run a little operation here. He smirked. Keeps us fed. My stomach churned at the implications. What kind of operation? You're pretty smart, he chuckled, a sharp, nasty sound. You must have guessed some of it already. Hikers, lost campers, people like you who stumble into our woods where they ain't wanted. Well, you gotta disappear. And folks like us, we gotta eat, right? The blood roared in my ears. Not. No, they couldn't be. A gruesome memory clawed its way to the surface. The woman's terrified scream, the smell in the shack, the stew in the old man's cabin. Oh yeah, he crooned like he could read my thoughts. Bet your stew's tasting real different now, huh? Truth is, we got a taste for the long pig. It's a good business out here where nobody asks too many questions. I tried to shut the images out, the revulsion threatening to overwhelm me. Desperation fueled a sudden burst of movement. I lunged forward, not toward him, but toward a rusty hatchet propped carelessly against the far wall. He must have seen my intent. He was faster, kicking hard into the side of my knee. Bone cracked, pain shooting through me like a white-hot knife. I crumpled, a choked sob tearing from my throat. It was no use. The madman grinned, strolling over to retrieve the hatchet. He wagged a finger in my face. Should have listened, Zeke. Nobody outsmarts us. Nobody escapes us. He hoisted the hatchet above his head, its rusty blade gleaming in the dim light. A sudden crashing noise outside the cabin made him freeze. What the hell? He muttered, his eyes darting toward the door. The old man must be back. Time was running out. In that split second of distraction, I found a flicker of hope. Maybe it was just a wild animal. Maybe I could somehow... I forced my pain-racked body into motion, lunging for his ankle. He half-turned, his grip on the hatchet faltering, a startled curse escaping his lips. I pulled hard. He lost his balance, tumbling toward the floor. The hatchet flew from his hand and skidded across the rough wooden floorboards. I couldn't think, only reach, scramble, my hand catching around the greasy handle as the madman roared and came down on me, his hands reaching for my throat. I swung with everything I had left, a desperate half-blind surge of movement. The hatchet bit into his shoulder, a sickening crunch of bone and flesh. Blood spattered across me as he screamed, a howl of rage and pain. I scrambled backward, my vision blurring as I pulled myself toward the door, my body a screaming mass of agony. Behind me, I could hear the madman scrambling, roaring curses. Stumbling out of the cabin, I fell to my knees. Cold night air filled my lungs as I panted, the pain in my knee almost unbearable. The adrenaline was fading fast and my body was giving way to exhaustion and terror. But I had to move, to keep going before he... My heart skipped a beat. Headlights cut through the trees, casting long shadows across the clearing. The old man's returning? Or, oh God, please let it be someone else. Anyone else. The vehicles screeched to a halt. Men in uniforms piled out, their shouts cutting through my muddled thoughts. I must have blacked out for a moment because when I looked again, the madman was being wrestled to the ground, his face a bloody mask. Pain was fading into numbness now, and I sagged forward into blessed darkness. I don't remember much after that. The concerned faces, the sirens, the hospital. But even now, with months of therapy behind me, the lingering sense of unease never fully fades. I'll catch a whiff of something metallic and greasy like the cabin, or find myself staring into the darkness, haunted by the madman's wild eyes. And always I wonder how many more are still out there, hiding in plain sight somewhere in those vast wild woods. My name is Luis Vargas, and I'm 27 years old, and this happened to me in 1994. I was fresh out of college, working my first job as a park ranger in the dense forests of northern Maine. I'd always loved the outdoors, ever since I was a kid camping with my dad. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to experience. Life was simple then. I'd spend my days patrolling the trails, making sure everything was in order, and my nights in a small cabin provided by the park services. I had a buddy, Leo Vasquez, who worked with me. Leo was a stocky guy with a laugh that could echo through the woods. We'd often joke about the old legends locals whispered about, the mysterious disappearances, and the wild man sightings. You know, typical campfire stories. One late afternoon, Leo and I were sitting outside my cabin sharing a couple of beers. Leo had a way of making even the most mundane patrols sound like an adventure. He was mid-story, exaggerating about a bear that had supposedly walked on 2 legs when our radios crackled to life. It was dispatch, asking us to check out an abandoned campsite deep in the forest. The campers hadn't checked out, and their car was still in the lot. Guess our bear on 2 legs might have some company. Leo joked, but there was a hint of unease in his voice. We grabbed our gear and headed out. The sun was setting as we made our way through the forest. The trees, tall and dense, cast long shadows that seemed to dance with the wind. It took us about an hour to reach the campsite, and when we did, it was eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your skin prickle. The campsite was a mess. Tent flaps flapping in the wind, sleeping bags thrown about, and an extinguished campfire with embers still glowing faintly. It looked like whoever was here had left in a hurry. "Looks like they had a bit too much fun," Leo said, but neither of us was convinced. There was something off about the place. We split up to search the area, keeping in constant radio contact. I headed towards the riverbank, following a trail of footprints that looked like they belonged to 2 adults and a child. As I walked, I noticed something odd. The forest, usually teeming with the sounds of wildlife, was dead silent. No birds, no rustling leaves, nothing. I reached the riverbank and found more signs of a struggle, a torn piece of fabric, a shoe, and what looked like claw marks on a tree. I radioed Leo. "Hey Leo, you seeing what I'm seeing?" "Yeah, I found a backpack. Looks like they left in a hurry. Any signs of them?" "Just more weirdness. Stay sharp." I continued along the river, the silence weighing on me. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, revealing more claw marks than broken branches. That's when I heard it, a rustling in the bushes. I froze, hand on my gun. The rustling grew louder, closer. "Leo, something's here," I whispered into the radio. Before he could respond, a figure burst through the bushes. A man, disheveled and wild-eyed, stumbled towards me. He looked terrified. "Help me!" He gasped, collapsing at my feet. He was covered in scratches and his clothes were torn. I knelt down to help him, trying to get him to calm down. "What happened? Where are the others?" I asked. But he just kept muttering about a monster and how it had taken his wife and son. "Leo, I found someone. He's hurt. Talking about a monster. We need to get him out of here." "On my way," Leo replied, but his voice was tense. As I tried to help the man up, I heard a low, guttural noise coming from the trees. I turned, shining my flashlight in the direction of the sound. The beam caught a pair of glowing eyes reflecting back at me from the darkness. They were too high up to belong to any normal animal. "Leo, hurry," I urged, my heart pounding in my chest. Leo arrived moments later, and together we half dragged, half carried the man back to the campsite. The noises in the forest seemed to follow us, growing louder and more menacing. We could feel eyes on us, watching our every move. We reached the campsite, and Leo and I decided it was best to leave immediately. The man, who we learned was named Garrett, was in no condition to walk the whole way back, so we made a makeshift stretcher from a tarp and some sturdy branches. The trek back was tense. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves had us on edge. Leo tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but it was clear he was just as scared as I was. Garrett kept mumbling about the monster in the woods, saying it had taken his family. We were about halfway back when we heard a blood-curdling scream. It was high-pitched, almost inhuman. Garrett started thrashing, trying to get up. "It's coming," he screamed. Leo and I exchanged a look. We both knew we couldn't outrun whatever was out there with Garrett until we needed to make a stand. We found a small clearing and set Garrett down, trying to calm him. "Everett, you stay with him." "I'll keep watch," Leo said, pulling out his rifle. I nodded, pulling my own gun out. The minutes dragged by, each one feeling like an eternity. The forest around us was alive with movement, shadows flitting between the trees. Then out of nowhere, it attacked. The creature was massive, covered in matted fur with claws that glinted in the moonlight. It moved with terrifying speed, knocking Leo to the ground before he could get a shot off. I fired my gun, the sound echoing through the trees. The creature snarled, turning its glowing eyes on me. I fired again and it let out a horrible noise before retreating into the darkness. Leo was hurt but alive. We quickly gathered Garrett and made a run for it, the creature's growls following us all the way back to the main trail. By the time we reached the ranger station, we were exhausted and battered. Garrett was taken to the hospital, rambling about his family being taken by the monster. The next few days were a blur of reports and searches. The police found no trace of Garrett's family, and the claw marks and damage we saw were dismissed as animal attacks. Leo and I knew better, but no one believed us. We were told to keep quiet about the monster and focus on more rational explanations. A few weeks later, Leo and I went back to the campsite during the day, hoping to find some clues. The forest seemed different, less menacing in the daylight. We found nothing but more signs of a struggle and an eerie silence that hung over the place. Garrett never recovered. He was moved to a psychiatric facility, still insisting that the creature had taken his wife and son. Leo and I stayed at our jobs for a few more months, but the forest never felt the same. We both eventually transferred to different parks, hoping to leave the nightmare behind. I've never forgotten that night. The creature, whatever it was, is still out there. Sometimes I think I see its glowing eyes in the dark, watching, waiting, but I try not to dwell on it. Life goes on, and so do we. Years later, I still keep in touch with Leo. We laugh about the old days, but we never talk about the creature. Some things are best left in the past. But every now and then I wonder what really happened to Garrett's family, and if anyone else has encountered the monster in those woods. It's a question that haunts me, but one I'll likely never have an answer to. If you ever find yourself in northern Maine, be careful. The forest has secrets, and some of them are better left undisturbed. My name is Daniel Martinez, and I am 31 years old, and this happened to me on September 14th, 1998. I had just bought an old RV from a buddy of mine, Sam Parsons. He swore it was a steal, so I took him at his word and set off to explore some quieter parts of Colorado. I figured it was a good excuse to take a break from my job at the warehouse and enjoy a bit of solitude. The RV wasn't fancy, but it had a bed, a small kitchen, and enough space to feel comfortable. The first couple of days were uneventful. I drove through small towns, stopping at diners for coffee and pie and making idle conversation with the locals. By the third day, I found a secluded spot by a lake near the edge of a dense forest. It was perfect. No cell signal, no other campers, just peace and quiet. I parked the RV, set up a folding chair by the water, and cracked open a beer. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the lake, and I felt a deep sense of calm. This was what I needed. As night fell, I lit a small campfire and cooked up some hot dogs. The crackling fire and the distant hoots of an owl were the only sounds I could hear. It was idyllic. Around midnight, I decided to call it a night. I doused the fire, locked up the RV, and crawled into bed. I slept like a rock until around 3 a.m, when I was jolted awake by a loud thud against the side of the RV. I sat up, groggy and disoriented, and listened. At first I thought it might be a bear or a deer, but the thudding continued, more rhythmic and deliberate than any animal I'd ever encountered. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously stepped outside, shining the beam around the perimeter of the RV. The forest was silent, and there was no sign of anything unusual. I convinced myself. It was just the wind or a branch falling from a tree, and went back inside. But as soon as I lay down, the thudding started again, this time accompanied by a scraping sound like nails on metal. Heart pounding, I searched the RV for something to defend myself with, and settled on a rusty old tire iron I found under the sink. I stepped outside again, circling the RV with the flashlight in one hand and the tire iron in the other. This time I noticed something strange. Deep, jagged scratches running along the side of the RV, too high up to have been made by any animal I knew of. I decided then and there to pack up and leave at first light. Dawn couldn't come soon enough. I barely slept, lying in bed with the tire iron at my side, ears straining for any sound. When the first light of morning crept through the windows, I threw on my clothes. fired up the RV and drove out of there as fast as I could. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I'd been alone too long and was jumping at shadows. I drove for hours, trying to shake off the eerie feeling that had settled over me. By afternoon, I found a small gas station and pulled in to refuel. The attendant, a wiry old man with a sun-weathered face, noticed the scratches on the RV and asked what had happened. I shrugged and told him it was probably a bear. He gave me a long, hard look. "Bears don't make scratches like that," he said, "and they don't knock." I laughed it off, but his words stuck with me. I decided to head to the nearest town and get a proper mechanic to look at the RV. I figured it wouldn't hurt to have someone else check it out. Maybe they'd see something I missed. The town of Redcliffe was small but charming. I found a mechanic, Hank, who agreed to take a look at the RV. As he inspected the scratches, his brow furrowed. "These aren't from any animal I know," he said, "and I've been out here my whole life. Looks like something tried to get in." "What do you mean, tried to get in?" I asked. Hank straightened up and looked at me. "I mean, whatever did this wasn't just messing around. It was trying to get inside." I felt a chill run down my spine. I thanked Hank, paid him for his time, and decided to stay at a motel for the night. I needed a shower and a good night's sleep that didn't involve being woken up by mysterious noises. The motel was old but clean, and the woman at the front desk was friendly. I asked her if there were any strange stories or local legends about the area, half joking, but she shook her head. "Nothing like that around here," she said. "It's usually pretty quiet." That night I slept soundly in the motel bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next morning I decided to cut my trip short and head back home. As I drove, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following me. I made it home without incident and parked the RV in my driveway. For a while, life returned to normal. I went back to work, met up with friends, and tried to forget about the strange encounter. But every so often, I'd catch myself staring at the scratches on the RV, wondering what had really happened. A few weeks later, I ran into Sam at a bar. He asked me how the RV trip had gone, and I told him about the scratches and the noises. He listened, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "But when I had that RV, something similar happened to me. I just thought I was imagining things, you know." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart sinking. Sam sighed. "One night I heard banging on the RV. Scratches appeared the next morning just like yours. I didn't think much of it, but now I felt a knot tighten in my stomach." "What do you think it is?" Sam shook his head. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's not just an animal." We sat in silence for a while, nursing our beers. Eventually we changed the subject, but the unease lingered. A few days later, I got a call from Hank, the mechanic. He sounded rattled. "Clyde, I think you should see this. Can you come by the shop?" When I arrived, Hank led me to the back of the shop where the RV was parked. He pointed to a section of the scratches I hadn't noticed before. Embedded in the metal were small, sharp pieces of what looked like bone or claw. I sent these to a buddy of mine who's a biologist. Hank said he couldn't identify them, said they're like nothing he's ever seen. I stared at the fragments, feeling a growing sense of dread. "What does that mean?" Hank shrugged. "I don't know, but it means whatever did this isn't from around here." I thanked Hank and drove home, my mind racing. Over the next few weeks, I became more paranoid. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside made me jump. I even bought a shotgun and kept it by my bed just in case. Then one night the noises started again. This time it was coming from outside my house. I grabbed the shotgun and peered out the window, but saw nothing. The noises continued, louder and more insistent. I stepped outside, shotgun at the ready, and circled the house. In the dim light, I saw movement near the RV. I raised the shotgun, my heart pounding. Slowly I approached, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. As I rounded the corner, I saw it, a hunched, shadowy figure clawing at the side of the RV. My breath caught in my throat. The creature was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It had long, bony limbs, and its eyes glowed a sickly yellow in the flashlight's beam. It turned towards me, its face twisted in a grotesque snarl. For a moment, we just stared at each other. And then it lunged. I fired the shotgun, the blast echoing through the night. The creature recoiled, letting out a piercing screech. I fired again, and it stumbled back, disappearing into the trees. My hands were shaking and I could barely breathe. I ran inside, locking the doors and windows, and called the police. By the time they arrived, the creature was long gone. They searched the area but found nothing. The only evidence was the fresh scratches on the RV and the shotgun shell casings on the ground. They took my statement but didn't seem convinced. I couldn't blame them. If I hadn't seen it myself, I wouldn't have believed it either. Over the next few days, I tried to go about my life, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I talked to Sam and he suggested we get rid of the RV. Maybe it was attracting whatever that thing was. Reluctantly, I agreed. We drove it out to a junkyard and left it there, hoping it would be the end of our troubles. For a while, it seemed to work. The noises stopped and the scratches didn't reappear, but the sense of unease never really left. Every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, or hear a faint scratching in the night. I moved to a new house, far away from the old one, hoping for a fresh start. But some nights I still wake up to the sound of scratching, and I wonder if it's out there looking for me. I've never seen it again, but I have a name for it now, a name that fits the fear it brings, the Haggard. So that's my story. I don't expect you to believe it, but it happened. And if you ever hear scratching in the night, take my advice, don't ignore it. Early 90s. As a 10-11-year-old, I didn't have any friends or much of a social life, so that summer I basically rode my bike a lot, hung out at parks, and went for walks in the woods to fill up my summer days. There was a creek and some pretty deep woods where I saw a number of kind of creepy things, and there had been rumors going on about the area that it was dangerous. To get there, you had to go off the main roads of the suburban town, past the country club, past the one-floor business complex, past isolated semi-wooded houses, past the old abandoned paper mill, past everything, and eventually down dirt paths into the woods. It's kinda isolated for the area, not many people around at that point. One hot summer day, I'm out riding my bike and I do my thing and hang out at the creek and then start heading back for lunch. I get my bicycle back to an area that has sidewalk, and at just the right spot to not be seen, I slammed into a small log that was just the right size to throw me hard off my bicycle. Bike wheel was dented. I was scratched up pretty bad, but nothing broken. Immediately, and I mean just seconds later, a small pickup truck slowly pulls up. Nice guy starts asking things and says, "I saw you fall off your bike," etc. "Hey kid, do you want a ride? Put it in the back," etc. I immediately thought, nope, this guy ain't right. Something about it set off a gentle alarm in my head. There wasn't anything specific other than the timing, and I didn't like that it was a truck. I wasn't panicked or anything. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I just instinctively didn't want this dude's help. So I said no thanks, and then I ignored him and anything else he said. I didn't give him the time of day, and he drove off. I didn't tell anyone. I thought later, years later, that the entire thing was weird. The log wasn't there when I went by the same piece of sidewalk a couple hours earlier. There's no way it fell from a tree. It wasn't a branch. It was bigger than that. It was definitely dragged to the exact spot in a dip that I wouldn't see until too late. And then there's this guy with a truck saying, "Put the bike in the back, I'll give you a ride," nanoseconds later. And there's absolutely no other traffic. I didn't give it a lot of thought until years later. At the time, I was just bothered enough to set off my spider sense. In retrospect, years later, I know that guy was suspect. Something bad happened while I was camping. I'm just not sure what. I'm not sure if I'm in the right place, but I've held this story in for the last 6 years because it sounds crazy, and I got told not to talk about it. I went camping 6 years ago with a now ex-boyfriend of mine. The campsite we picked was beautiful. We were able to drive in through some rough trails. The spot we picked was next to some hiking trails that weren't very far from some natural hot springs and a huge waterfall. We were in the middle of nowhere. Absolutely no one was around. We set up camp next to the car, went hiking, soaked in the hot springs, came back and had dinner. It was all very normal, until we woke up the next day. I need to give some context as to how we slept that night so you can understand my confusion. Before we went to sleep, I put our food cooler and a stereo that we brought in the car and locked it. I put the keys in the front pocket of my backpack and put the backpack next to my sleeping bag on the far side of the tent, away from the door of the tent. My boyfriend at the time slept nearest the door of the tent with a gun next to him. We woke up the next morning and I felt fine. I had slept hard, and from inside the tent everything seemed normal. When we got out, our campsite was absolute chaos. The fire pit we had made was ruined. The cooler had been thrown and food was scattered all over the place. The stereo was smashed to pieces, laying next to a tree. All of the car doors were open, including the trunk. We stood there for a minute in silence, just taking everything in. The woods felt off now. It was quiet and not the beautiful campsite that I saw yesterday. Everything about those woods felt wrong now. My ex accused me of not locking the car the night before and that an animal got in our stuff. I promised that I had locked it and went into the tent to grab the keys from my backpack, but they weren't there. I found them later on the ground right next to the car. We quickly threw everything in the trunk and left. My boyfriend was quiet and wouldn't talk to me about what had just happened. He finally spoke up when we were almost home and told me that he had had a dream the night before about something kneeling over him in the tent holding his gun and just staring at him. When I tried to ask him more questions, he got quiet again and said he didn't want to talk about it and that I shouldn't talk about it anymore either. I've tried to forget about it, but I just can't. Something really wrong happened to us in the woods that night.